This program was recorded on Monday, January 20th, in the year of our Lord 2020. The opinions expressed by the participants in the following program do not necessarily represent those of this station or its management.
Or anybody else.
From the John DeVita Recording Studio, located in an undisclosed and clandestine location on the great northwest side of our fair city of Chicago, we once again are pleased to be presenting yet another edition of our monthly roundtable panel discussion show, Meet the Chicago Historians. Now here's the guy who started it all, John DeVita.
Well, thank you very much, Rich. From the John DeVita Broadcast Center, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Meet the Chicago Historians on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network. On Monday, January the 20th, the year 2020. Today, the panel will be talking about several different subjects. So sit back and enjoy Meet the Chicago Historians. And now to start today's broadcast, here's our announcer, Mr. Richard Lang.
And now, here's our panel moderator, John S. Kocholko. John.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John. It's good to be with you for our January edition, our first edition of this new year of our Lord, 2020. So we're glad to have you back with us. We've been on a sort of a sabbatical. We have not been on the air for several months. We did not broadcast the months of November or December. And that was because our impresario, John DeVita, had some special responsibilities, some surgery that had to be attended to, and so in respect of his situation, we did not have our programs for November, December, so there was no Thanksgiving edition of Meet the Chicago Historians and no Christmas edition, but we're back. We're back in this new year. We're back on January the 20th, Inauguration Day. One year from today will be Inauguration Day of the President of the United States, and we're here. We're glad to say that John is up and around and spry. He's going to be out jogging later this afternoon, so you might look for him on the highways and byways on the northwest side. You'll see him he'll be wearing his Meet the Chicago Historians sweatshirt and baseball cap, so he'll be easy to spot. But, you know, on the old Dick Van Dyke Show, it said created and produced by Carl Reiner, where our show is created and produced by John DeVita. So, John, it's good to see you back, and let's give John a round of applause.
Hey, welcome back, John.
Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate everybody's concern during the time I was laid up. Every lot of phone calls, and a lot of people were out to help me, and I really appreciate it. I sat in my chair and I thought about our programs in November and our program in December, but unfortunately I was not able to climb up and down steps and be down here in the studios. But now, thanks be to a great doctor, Dr. Brian McCall at Resurrection Hospital. He got me up and going in no time flat. As I sit here today in the control room, I have absolutely no pain, nothing whatsoever. I'm able to walk, and he straightened out my leg. I'm not walking bow-legged anymore, and it's just great. He was just a great doctor, and I highly recommend him to anybody. So, again, thanks, everybody. Happy New Year, and welcome back.
Well, thank you very much, John. We're glad to see you're in such good spirits and good health, and we certainly look forward to 12 monthly editions ahead in this new year of 2020. We're glad to have you here. A couple of quick points at the beginning. I mentioned today is the 20th of January, which every 4 years is Inauguration Day, so it will be Inauguration Day a year from today. I also want to mention, as always, we're at our undisclosed and highly clandestine and highly secured location. We're in a deep, deep underground bunker somewhere on the northwest side of, well, we don't even want to disclose exactly whether it's in Chicago or the suburbs. We're on the northwest side. I always warn people, don't try to look for us. you'd have to go through so many checkpoints. There are so many guard posts and barbed wire entanglements. And even if you get to the building, there's so many levels because we're so deep. This is such a deep sub basement. So don't try to find us. Just listen to us and enjoy our broadcast.
Just tell everybody that we're in Crook County.
We're in Crook. I'm sorry, Cook County. I almost said Crook County. Cook, named for Daniel Pope Cook, I believe was the name. He was the first congressman from the state of Illinois. Daniel P. Cook was our first congressman. He wasn't from what is today Cook County. He was from the deep southern part of the state because that's where all the population was in those days. There were very few people living up in what is today Cook County, but in any event, that's what Cook County is named for. We've been wishing each other a Happy New Year today, and that's appropriate. It's our first time getting together since New Year's. I've wished people a Merry Christmas as well that I hadn't seen. And just a couple of points. You know, we in America, we begin celebrating Christmas earlier and earlier. I mean, people are putting up Christmas decorations right after the 4th of July, it seems now. You go into stores in September and October, and they're already putting up Christmas decorations. It really begins in full swing right after Halloween. I mean, they just blow past Thanksgiving. And immediately after Halloween, one of the radio stations begins doing Christmas music. But I always like to point out that, you know, traditionally it was the other way around. Christmas began on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and you celebrated Christmas after. And that's where we get the notion of the 12 days of Christmas and the song on the first day of Christmas, etc., etc. You celebrated Christmas beginning on Christmas Day. That was the first day of Christmas, and it extended until January the 6th, which is the Feast of the Three Kings, the Epiphany, the visit of the three kings from the east. So Christmas extended at least until January the 6th, but it was also the custom for many centuries in Europe and in Britain that it extended all the way until February the 2nd, which we know as Groundhog Day, which is my father's birthday, and which in Britain and in Europe was known as Candlemas Day. It was the day in the church when you blessed candles. And you kept your Christmas decorations up all through the month of January, which I do because January is such a dismal month that it sort of brightens my spirits to still have the Christmas tree and the decorations up and the greenery. So you can still legitimately wish people a Merry Christmas if you haven't seen them and you didn't see them during the Christmas season. There's nothing wrong with wishing them a Merry Christmas even now, all the way up until Groundhog Day, until Punxsutawney Phil rings down the curtain on the traditional celebration of Christmas. All right, what I'd like to do is go around the table as we do and introduce each of the members of our panel. And I'll start with the gentleman who is to my left, as indeed everyone on earth is to my left, because no one stands to the right of me, ladies and gentlemen. But the gentleman who geographically today is to my left, our great announcer, let's have him introduce himself once again.
Yes, I am your announcer, Richard Lang. I've got a background in teaching modern American and European history, and more recently I've gotten more and more involved in Chicago history, especially neighborhood history. There's a wealth of information and enjoyment out there for that. And I'm also involved in a group that recreates old-time radio shows.
Very good, thank you, Rich. And I will go directly across from Rich at our we have this magnificent oak table that we broadcast from. I wish you could invite you down here to see this great hall in which we are meeting. But in any event, directly across from Rich, let's hear from our next panelist.
Hey, I'm Don Peter from Oak Park, and I'm a member of the Fire Museum of Greater Chicago. I'm a volunteer, and I like it, and glad to be here.
Here.
Okay, and then down at the far end of the table.
That's me down here, John. Dennis Fitzgerald. I'm a retired Chicago policeman, and currently I take exceptional pride in heading up the Police Council of the Knights of Columbus. It's pretty outstanding that it is, in that the Knights of Columbus is 138 years old, having accomplished 17,500 councils around the world in 14 countries, but there's only one police council, and that's here in Chicago, and that's what I'm proud to head up. And our chaplain is the police chaplain, Father Dan Brandt. So glad to be here today to start 2020 off right. And John, you forgot to mention, referencing our location as clandestine as it is. But also, we should add, the doors are locked and the PC police cannot get in.
All right.
That's a good point. I'm glad you pointed that
Okay.
out. Thank you very much. Now, we heard from our police representative, so it's in honor of being fair and balanced. We have to have a representative of the fire department. So let's hear from our fire department representative.
And that's me, Bill Kugelman. I spent 46 years in the Chicago Fire Department, John, and loved every minute of it, and miss it very, very much. I also was, as Dennis pointed out, the guy that started the KC in the fire department, which we called St. Florian's, and it was a pleasure. We had Father Tom Mulcrone. What a great guy he was. I shouldn't say that he was, but he is a great guy. Trying to get him back, but I was also the president at one time of the Fire Museum of Greater Chicago, and I'd like to invite everybody on the fourth Saturday of the month, which is coming up, would be the 25th of January. We have open house at 5218 Southwestern, and that's open from 10 to 2. Please try to make it. Bring a camera. Bring the kids. We have old fire trucks in there that they can get up and take a picture on and snoop around. And it's been a very, very welcome part of Chicago. My thanks to Alderman Ed Burke, who made this possible to be here at 5218 Southwestern, and it's an old firehouse, abandoned firehouse that we have recreated, and it's really turned out to be a sensation. We have people coming there from not from just this state, this city, but from this country and from other countries. It looks like we're getting plenty of attention on the fire department side. So and John DeVita, as you say, is the leader here. He's the guy that takes the key home with him and won't let anybody else in except for us on the third Monday. So John, let's get started.
Thank you very much. And I like to point out that we have a police and fire panelist, one of each. So that's as close as this program gets to being fair and balanced. But we are fair and balanced as between the two departments. For many years in town government, I was chairman of the Police and Fire Committee, so I'm neutral. I want to assure everybody that I will not show partiality between the police service and the fire service. So they all get a fair shake on this program, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, we're at our January edition. We're well into it, our first program of the new year, and what we customarily do is do a little bit of a round-robin review of the news, and in doing that, I should pay a little tribute to the man who's not here with us, whom we miss very much, who would often say those words about how we were going to do a look at the news, and that is our longtime host and moderator, John Jack Red Ryan. Jack Ryan, our good buddy, who moderated this show for many, many years, and he's had some health difficulties now for some time. If he's able to listen into this show, we wish him the best. I had some contact with his wife over the Christmas season. He's doing much better. Jack is actually doing much better. So we have at least some good news on that front. So, Jack, if you're listening, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year from your buddies here at Meet the Chicago Historians. Okay, we've got a full plate of news coming up tomorrow for only the third time in the history of these United States, as they once said. There will be the beginnings of an impeachment trial in the United States Senate of the incumbent President of the United States. So that's going to begin tomorrow morning. It's going to be televised. Been a great deal of news about the impeachment, so I suppose unless someone believes there's a bigger story in the news, that we could start off with that. Would anyone like to say anything to open up our discussion of the news of the week?
We can't forget that today is the day it's celebrated Martin Luther King.
That's right.
And that, of course, is all over the country. So, too bad he's not around now. Maybe he could solve some of these problems that are out in the world, in the country. Oh, let's not forget that.
Okay, very good. That's right. Today is Martin Luther King Day, the third Monday in January. And that is, national holiday observed today. They announced today that an aircraft carrier is being named for the sailor who grabbed a machine gun and began firing at the Japanese in the attack on Pearl Harbor. The next United States aircraft carrier is going to be named in honor of him. His name is Dory. I'm not sure if that's his first or last name. I know it's Dory. I think that's his last name. But he's very famous. I've seen pictures of him being decorated by Admiral Nimitz. He was given the Navy Cross by Admiral Nimitz. He was a cook on one of the ships in Pearl Harbor that was under attack on the Day of Infamy, and he grabbed a heavy machine gun and began firing at the Japanese aircraft that were strafing his warship. And the Navy announced today that the next United States aircraft carrier will be named in his honor. So,
Good.
A true hero of the Second World War.
I've got a question. Did it break tradition, or is it going to break tradition? I was under impression that the aircraft carriers were named after presidents.
No, today, in recent years, they have named them after great presidents. So you've got the George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush are among the presidents who are honored. But you've had admirals, so we had the Nimitz class of carriers.
Right.
There was the USS Nimitz. You may remember that movie, The Final Countdown, where an aircraft carrier in the 1980s is transported back to the time of Pearl Harbor. That was the Nimitz. Previously, aircraft carriers were named for famous warships. So you had the Enterprise, which was a historic name of American warships, the Constellation. You had the Essex carriers. The Navy no longer is very rigid in terms of the ships that can be named. And our John DeVitt has just given me a baseball cap from the USS Ronald Reagan, which is carrier number 76, called CVN, which means carrier vessel. If you ever seen the actual designation of carriers, it's CV, carrier vessel. And the N means nuclear, because it's a nuclear-powered carrier. The old carriers were just CV. But that was number 76, and so there are at least one or two beyond that. There's also a carrier named for John Stennis, who was a United States Senator and was chairman of the Armed Services Committee and was a great booster of the Navy throughout his career in the Senate. Was so great an advocate of the armed forces in general and the Navy that they named one of the carriers after Senator John C. Stennis. I believe he was from Mississippi. So there's no rigid rule anymore. It used to be, battleships were named for states, cruisers were named for cities, destroyers were named for naval heroes. Well, they tend to move around things. And now we have nuclear submarines that are named for states. We've got our missile-firing submarines, the Ohio class, and so forth. So they're really they don't hold hard and fast to that idea that ships have to be named after a particular category of people.
Those flatbed carriers, they're the largest vessel afloat, aren't they? They're like floating cities.
Oh, yeah. They're
huge, massive.
80, we're dealing with ships now 80, 90,000 tons.
Yeah.
Right.
The Iowa-class battleships were about 55,000 tons, so they're even bigger. They're bigger than the Iowa-class battle. They're bigger than the Yamato, the Japanese Yamato of World War II.
And they can accurately be referred to as floating airports,
Oh, sure.
of course.
Right.
With I don't know what how many they house on the different levels as they bring them up with the hydraulics and that.
They can have, you can have over 100 planes on a carrier today, where the World War II carriers were nowhere near as big, and they couldn't carry as many aircraft. And they always say, a carrier essentially owns the Navy for so many hundreds of miles as far as those planes can fly.
Right.
You got these, they call them battle groups now, a carrier battle group. You have a carrier cruisers, destroyers, submarines, and it essentially owns that whole sector of the ocean wherever they're sailing, as far as those planes can fly. They're equipped with they have the Aegis system air defense that can bring down not just planes but missiles, can shoot down enemy missiles. And the Aegis is an old technology. They've probably gone beyond the Aegis system today. So they have cruise missiles that can be fired at and can carry a nuclear warhead. We've got an agreement with the Russians about cruise missiles, but many of those agreements I think are now in abeyance. But in any event, the carrier is an awesome weapon of war.
Thousands of people
Awesome.
on there.
And we're
on
really
that
the only
crew.
country in the world that has carriers in those numbers and of that capability.
During the war, they actually had two classes of carriers. They had the regular carrier, and then they had escort
carriers.
And I think they ran in packs of 3 or 4 at a time.
They would escort convoys. They would send them so that the convoys of commercial vessels would be protected, would have air cover from the escort carriers. The United States Navy, at the end of World War II, the United States Navy was bigger than all the other navies of the world put together. And that included the German and Japanese navies, which were all at the bottom of the ocean by that point, thanks to the efforts of the United States Navy.
And thank you to the present president for bringing our defense system back up to where it should be.
Oh, yeah.
It's an untold story because the media does not dwell on his accomplishments, but he has significantly increased spending on defense, which had been lagging for a number of years. We were coasting on the Reagan defense buildup. Reagan had this enormous buildup in the 1980s, and throughout the 1990s and into this century, we just coasted on the B-1 bombers and the B-2 bombers and the Abrams tanks, all the equipment that had been built in the 80s. Well, eventually, even that great equipment has to be upgraded or replaced.
Right.
And Reagan's buildup is now being, improved upon and expanded upon by this administration. And the president deserves a great deal of credit for that because we face the Chinese are expanding, the Russians are as weak as their economy is. They're still trying to throw their weight around throughout the world.
I was watching a program and they were talking about the readiness of our Navy, and we were getting to carriers, and they said it was getting to the point where they'd have to go to some place out in the desert and start scavenging parts for aircraft to fix the ones that were still in service.
For their spare parts. That was the previous administration, Don. And when they depleted, they ran the military down. And when you did need parts, whether it be for aircraft or land vehicles, you had to go to a boneyard for them. Unbelievable.
Yes, that was terrible.
That's where they would cut. When they wanted to cut, they would cut on spare parts, repairs, ammunition, supplies, all the stuff you don't see that's kind of hidden. Not on the big ticket. They would continue building the bombers and the missiles, but they wouldn't be building all the stuff you need to keep those bombers and ships and planes going. And
one could only guess where we would have been had Donald Trump not come along.
That's right.
If those previous policies were continued, what would our status be? What would our abilities be?
Down the tubes.
There was one exception to that. That's the B-52. And those started in what, 1952?
The B-52 was actually, they began work on it in the Truman administration. The design and development began in the Truman administration.
Right. It was an upgrade of the B-47.
They first flew in the 1950s. The first B-52s went into the inventory around 1955 or 56, and they're still flying the last editions of the B-50, and they intend to continue flying the B-52 for probably another 20 years. It's just no plane in American history has ever had a lifespan that the B-52 had. And they've used them in the Iraq War, they used them in Vietnam, they used them in Afghanistan.
But not World War II?
No, it wasn't around. The B-29 was our greatest plane in World War II, and if they You know, it's funny, if you have air superiority, if you knock out the enemy's air defenses, you could still be flying the B-29, for God's sakes. I mean,
Right.
if you get rid of all of their fighters and air defenses, you could fly, piston engine planes in there and bomb them. But,
Right. And
but we didn't keep the B-29s in service as long as we did the B-29 was a great plane. It was the greatest aircraft of World War II.
Right.
No one had anything even remotely approaching the
Speaking of
B-29.
the B-29, I think there was a variant of it that the airlines used of the B-29. They didn't call it B-29, but it was a Boeing something.
They upgraded it, and there was a plane called the B-50 that went into service in the late 40s, which was really an upgraded B-29. But the problem with the B-29 was it was piston engine, and when jets came in,
Right.
it didn't have the speed. If you're dealing with enemy fighters, it would be vulnerable to a jet fighter.
And probably the range. I don't know if they were capable of in-flight fueling or not.
The range of B-29 was about 5,000 miles. They could fly. That's why when we got the Marianas, when we got Guam and Tinian and Saipan, then we could bomb Japan. That gave us the basis to bomb Japan with the B-29. It would have been interesting what the Nazis would have thought if we had used them in Europe. I've often thought it would have been interesting to have a couple of hundred B-29s bombing the 1,000-year Reich, but
Right.
they didn't need. By that time, Germany had been bombed into oblivion already, so they
Speaking
didn't
of the
need them.
Nazis, I don't think Germany ever produced a 4-engine bomber that
No.
I can think of.
No, they may have had it on the drawing boards, but they never had an operational 4-engine. They never had anything like the B-17, let alone the B-29.
The closest, well, it wasn't a bomber, but the closest thing they had to a fast fighter was the ME-262.
The jet, the ME-262, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, came in the end of 44. And while we're talking about World War II, I mean, we ought to at least pay a brief homage to those who fought in the Battle of the Bulge. I was going to say a little bit.
Past that anniversary.
A little bit later, I think later in the
No.
program, I'd like to say a little bit about that. But for now, we're coming up. We're coming really to the end. Maybe we'll wait until our second half hour. But giving you a little bit of information about the B-52. I just saw a program about the B-52s being flown. I mean, they look completely different from the way they look in the 50s. They've painted them, and they've got the modern style markings on them. But it's just an incredible plane. I remember when I was a kid going out to Arizona, we passed near an Air Force base, and I saw a B-52 in the air, which you don't see in the and if you live in Chicago, you'll never see a B-52 or any of these great. They don't fly over populated areas, at least at a level it's. But I remember looking up from a swimming pool and seeing a B-52 flying directly over me. And I saw B-47s too. They were still flying. This was in the late 50s.
Right.
I saw a B-47 in the air and saw them on runways. We passed an Air Force installation, and you could see them on the runways from the highway. I imagine today they probably got them set in for security, where terrorism and so forth. But I remember there was nothing more to a kid, to a 10-year-old kid, having read about these planes, to actually see one flying in the air was just incredible. Look up and see that
I'm
big.
learning now about putting the aircraft carrier in perspective, the role of Billy Mitchell, that sort of thing. Would we say, was America, our country, the first to build and christen an aircraft carrier, perhaps in the late 20s?
We had the Langley was our first carrier.
That sounds right.
It was
yeah.
it was like a collier or a coal. I think it was a coal carrying ship, which was converted. They put a flat deck on it, and its smokestacks could be lowered to provide a clear flight deck. It had these two smokestacks because you still had to power the ship, and they could be lowered so that when planes were taking off and landing, they wouldn't crash into the stacks. It was essentially a train. It was a sort of a vessel to give us practice. The first American plane to land on a ship was, I think, the battleship Pennsylvania. They put a wooden deck on the Pennsylvania in like 1916, I'm going to say, and they landed a plane to prove that you could, in fact, land a plane on a moving ship. So, there were all these, and the British were experimenting. I think the British had the first ship actually afloat that was used as a carrier at the end of the First World War, just after the First World War.
Right.
Oh yeah, they were already experimenting in the early, thinking of it at the end of World War I and experimenting with it right after the First
And
World
a lot
War.
of that experiment went right here in Chicago on Lake Michigan.
Sure.
Right.
and they did a lot of it.
Probably the only two paddle wheel aircraft carriers
Yeah.
there was.
The Wolverine.
Right.
The Wolverine, yeah. There are all these. I just got a gift of a book about all of the World War World War II warbirds that are at the bottom of Lake Michigan that they're
Yes.
finding now and bringing them up and repairing all these planes that that crashed in training. I mean, they're always
Right.
planes that go over the deck.
That's right.
So they've found all of these historic, and in some cases, because we didn't put these planes aside and keep them, these may be the only salvageable examples of some of these less well-known planes
Right.
that they're finding at the bottom of Lake Michigan.
You know,
So-
John, you mentioned you referenced a wooden deck. I slept overnight on a submarine with a wooden deck. It was the USS Silversides, and this was with the Scouts. And I seem to recall that they used teak wood,
Right.
and
right.
it was it had a wooden deck with spaces between the planking, to drain and all that when it goes up and down and all that. But it was a wooden deck on the top side of the submarine.
Teak wood is supposed to be the most resistant to salt water. That's why battleships had
That's right.
teak wood.
But who would have ever
Yeah,
thought?
yeah.
But then again, the practicality of it, because the vessel is roundish and all that. And when you're topside, the planking, the wooden deck would be more functional
Right.
for whatever you had to do topside. But that was the case, and we were afforded the opportunity. As I slept overnight on the wooden deck of the submarine, I was also afforded the following night the captain's quarters.
Ah,
And I'll tell you, it's not a very big berth. Your feet will touch the wall. It was allocated. On submarines they didn't have.
Not much
You
room
couldn't
there.
be-
he had the only private quarters on a submarine. The only private quarters, the captain.
Yeah, but you couldn't be a tall individual.
No.
Is my point. And but whatever. It was an honor to have that available to me.
That teak wood is very expensive.
Okay, and now to our announcer, Rich Lang.
You've been listening to Meet the Chicago Historians, and we thank
me
you
your
for it. We'll be right back.
Da-da-da-da-da-da.
If I'm not mistaken, I think you hit the current.
Hello, friends. Are you looking for a place to have some printing done? Well, I have the right place for you to go, and that is the printing store in Oak Park, Illinois. Call or see Phil Berry at 621 Madison Street or call 708-383-3638. Phil Berry will sit down with you and help you plan whatever you need printed. Now his products are brochures, booklets, business cards, catalogs, envelopes, letterheads, flyers, invitations, newsletters, notepads, menus, mailers, manuals, labels, posters, postcards, price list, NCR forms, sale sheets, table tents, pocket folders, and presentation forms. And he also has 1 to 4 color offset printing, digital copying, high-speed copying, graphic designs, typesetting, laminating, foil stamping, die cutting, and imprinting. And his complete bindery service includes booklets, cutting, scoring, folding, numbering, padding, and drilling. So once again, for all your printing needs, call or see Phil Berry at the printing store at 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, Illinois, or call 708-383-3638. They are located at Madison Street and Clarence, just east of Oak Park Avenue. And that's at 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, Illinois, or give Phil Berry a call at 708-383-3638. 3638. For all your printing needs, call or see Phil Berry at the printing store at 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, Illinois, or call 708-383-3638. They are located at Madison Street and Clarence, just east of Oak Park Avenue. And that's at 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, Illinois, or give Phil Berry a call at 708-383-3638. For all your printing needs, The printing store is there to help you. They're 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, Illinois. And once again, you can call Phil Berry at 708-383-3638.
Now back to our show. John?
Thank you very much, and we're here once again with our January, our premier edition of this new year 2020, AD, Anno Domini, kicking off the year on the 20th of the first month of 2020 with our January edition of Meet the Chicago Storms. We've been talking about aircraft carriers and B-52s, and I was pointing out that in World War II we had the United States put wooden decks on its carriers, which might seem to be strange in combat, but a wooden deck can be much more easily repaired if it's hit by a shell or a bomb than a steel deck. Some of our enemies built carriers with steel decks, and when those were bombed and shelled, it's not very easy to repair steel that's been cut and blasted and is jagged. It's a lot easier to repair a wooden deck. So that was something that would seem on the surface not to be a good idea, which actually was a very effective idea during World War II. So we're talking about World War II. We're in the anniversary, January the 9th of 1945. The United States Armed Forces landed on the island of Luzon in the Philippines, the main island of the Philippines. They landed at a bay called the Lingayen Gulf on the 9th of January 45, and that began the reconquest of the main island of the Philippines. The Bataan Peninsula, which everyone is familiar with, is on Luzon, where the horrendous Bataan Death March took place in 1942, and the Japanese marched American soldiers, many of them to their deaths. The island of Corregidor is off the coast of the island of Luzon, and of course Manila, the capital city. And I mention this because my dad was one of the soldiers that went ashore on the 9th of January 1945, 75 years ago this month, and was involved in fighting on the Bataan Peninsula and the liberation of Manila. My dad, Private First Class John E. Kacholko of the Company I of the 63rd Infantry Regiment of the 6th Infantry Division of the United States Army under the overall command of then General of the Army. He had been promoted in November, General of the Army Douglas MacArthur, one of the greatest American soldiers of all time. So I like to pay a tribute to my dad. His birthday will be Groundhog Day, February the 2nd. My dad, who was one of the soldiers who landed and fought for the liberation of the Philippines, the last great, in a sense, one of the last great Army battles in the Pacific in World War II. So we're in this 75th year. We'll be marking the 75th anniversary of VE Day and VJ Day and the crossing of the Rhine in Europe. We're in the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge, the costliest battle for American forces in Europe in terms of casualties. More Americans were lost in the Battle of the Bulge, the Ardennes Forest, which began just before Christmas of 44 and extended into January of 45. There's a great movie called Battleground with John Hodiak, I believe, with Van Johnson, with George Murphy, Ricardo Montalban, great, very sort of realistic picture about the Battle of the Bulge. It's not on TV very much. I remember seeing it years ago when I was younger. If you have a chance to see the movie Battleground, it gives you a very realistic portrayal of what the GIs were up against in the Ardennes Forest.
John, a little bit more about your father, if you don't mind. Was he injured in the battle? Did he survive the war by many years?
My dad lived until February of 2000.
Is that right?
My dad lived. He was 83 years old. He was born in 1917, the year of this great movie that's out now, 1917. My dad got a scratch, I think, in the Philippines, and his company sergeant was going to put him in for a Purple Heart, and my dad declined it. He said it's just a scratch. I don't deserve a Purple Heart. He said that should go to guys that are really injured.
Very good story.
And I've always thought that's one of that kind of tells you a lot about my father. He got the Bronze Star for heroism in the Philippines. He saved a lieutenant. A lieutenant was pinned down by Japanese fire. My dad crawled out from where he was across the field. The lieutenant was injured. He pulled the lieutenant back to the foxhole and saved his life. And for that, my dad was awarded the Bronze Star for Heroism, which I have. I have his Bronze Star.
Sounds like a great guy.
And I'm deeply proud of him.
Yeah.
And I
Very
appreciate
much
your
so.
asking
Very
me.
much so.
I'm glad to
Outstanding.
talk. I'm always
Yeah.
glad to talk about my dad. Thank you. Thank you very much. So here we are. I'll again open the panel up. We've talked about a number of things. We usually do this review of the news. Is there anything in the news that anybody would like to talk about? I mentioned impeachment, but there's something else that anyone else would like to bring to the fore. Here's your
John, if
opportunity.
I could mention, before we get too distant, but reference it in a previous segment, I know John, Bill Kugelman, he talked of his fire background and all that, as distinguished as it was, many, many years that he acquired. In the Knights of Columbus, we're going to be honoring one of our members who serves in the city council as an alderman, and he has 18 plus years as a fireman in his background, and we're very pleased to honor him. And I'm talking about Alderman Nick Spizzato.
Oh,
And this is going to be coming up on our 22nd anniversary in our council. This is going to be celebrated on the 14th of March at Mayfield Banquets. And should anybody want to support our event, of course, you just in general, Knights of Columbus is a good thing to support. And if they want to honor our Man of the Year, Alderman Nick Spizzato, you can do that by surfing into our website. And that's, if you have a pencil and paper, that's Knights, KNIGHTS, 12173.us. Knights12173.us. And should you want to post an ad in the ad book or partake in our event, tickets are available via that website. And I know Nick Spizzato has many friends out there, and hopefully the word will spread, and we want to recognize them. And one last thing, John, as Bill referenced the holiday of Martin Luther King, I just want to mention, for the sake of trivia, Martin Luther King Sr. was a Republican. And I wonder what he would think of these times now. You know, you would swear that your ears are lying to you when you hear some of their platforms to do away with this, that this agency should not cooperate with this agency, and this other agency should be disbanded. It boggles the mind. Not only that, but their points of view on the right to life, and their points of view on do away with coal. Totally, absolutely do away with coal. It's unbelievable. But point of trivia, Martin Luther King Sr. was a proud Republican, and I hope nobody misses that or escapes to realize that.
From the time of the Civil War down to the 1950s, and to some extent the Roosevelt years changed it, but black voters were traditionally Republican because it had been Abraham Lincoln, and the old saying that Lincoln had freed the slaves.
Sure.
The Republican Party was the party that had prosecuted the war against the Southern so-called Confederacy and against the institution of slavery. And for years, in many Southern states, the few Republican voters that there were black voters. But that changed. The change in the late 50s and 60s, when Martin Luther King was jailed at one point in 1960, the Kennedys made a phone call to wish him well, and that was then well publicized. And that was the beginning of the notion that the Democratic Party was more concerned about the needs and problems. But you're absolutely right. Martin Luther King Sr. was a Republican, and we tend to forget those things.
Yeah. At the risk of being facetious or whatever, you wonder, do they really teach that to them in school? Or do they think they're better off without that knowledge? I mean, to know your past, to know the origins, they teach what they keep them uninformed.
Well, you can certainly argue that the Democratic Party was the party of slavery.
That's right.
The Democratic Party was supreme in the South before the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln. It's said that Abraham Lincoln was not even, his name was not even on the ballot on most of the southern states in 1860.
Right.
His name wasn't, he wasn't even there as an option for people to vote for. He didn't carry, obviously didn't carry any of the southern states. And there was this sense that after the war, the Democratic Party was the party of segregation. It was the party of all those well-known public officials that were standing in schoolhouse doors, and they were all Democrats. Now the media doesn't like to talk about
Right.
that. They don't dwell on that. They kind of glide over that. And I heard recently there was someone, a very young person, was describing all of the segregationists in the 50s. They were all a bunch of Republicans. Under the impression that these guys were all Republicans. Why? Because that's what they're told. That Republicans are the bad. In any event, the Republicans are the bad guys. So they must have been the bad guys in the segregation battle, even though they weren't. Even though those guys were all Democrats.
To the contrary, all the Confederacy in all of Abraham Lincoln's in-laws were all Democrats.
Well, his wife
And-
was a Southerner. Yeah.
And virtually all the governors up until the early 60s were all Democrats.
Oh, sure.
There was probably a couple here and there, but virtually the Democrats pretty much ruled the South.
Little footnote, you often hear me say the so-called Confederacy, because that's what Lincoln always called it. Lincoln always referred to it as the so-called Confederacy. And the reason was he did not believe it was legitimate. He did not believe, for Lincoln, what the war was all about was that the South was not separated from the Union. There was no right to secede. There was no constitutional right for them to secede from the Union. So therefore, this was all, for what he was concerned, it was all fictitious. There was no real Confederacy because they had no right to secede. So he would never give them the dignity of calling it the Confederacy, because that would be acknowledging that they had a right to exist. And in his view, that was what the war was all about. The United States was indivisible and you could not secede from the Union.
He had lost numerous times in running for different office, but he persevered, and hence, he was successful. So perseverance. It doesn't matter how many times you lose; it's persevere.
He's an incredible man. We're coming, of course, before we meet again, we will have observed his birthday, February the 12th. It's a shame that that is not a national holiday. It's a shame that Washington's birthday is no longer a national holiday. We have this fictitious President's Day, which doesn't mean anything. No one knows exactly. Does it mean every president? Does it mean Washington and Lincoln? What does?
Right.
And that's one of the problems that I have with this. But Lincoln was. I often say, if you want to be president of the United States, and you have no you either have to have executive experience or you have to be Abraham Lincoln.
That's right.
Because he's really the only great president we ever had who came to office not having run anything. He had never been a governor. He'd never been a mayor. He had never had.
Congressman briefly.
But congressmen aren't executives. See, I mean, he was
That's
a
true.
one-term congressman.
You're a good salesman.
Congress. He had run a law firm, a two-man law firm. He had a partner. But, I mean, he'd never had any of the things we take for granted. A president has to be a governor, a senator, a general. He didn't do any of those things.
He persevered.
And he's one of the greatest, some say the greatest president the nation ever had.
But now, in all fairness, you got to put Trump into the equation.
Trump is.
So he's
That's
a record
right.
setter.
You know,
But
I
he
explained.
did run a major business
I
operation.
explained to
He had
my
experience running a
Right,
huge business operation.
And I explained to my grandkids that the United States of America is a big company,
That's right.
and this guy is a company man.
Yeah.
He's a manager, and that's what we needed.
Well, sure.
And getting back to President's Day, it's my opinion that the only reason it exists is because they get a Monday day off.
What was that, Don?
People get a Monday day off.
Oh, sure.
You have a 3-day weekend.
Well, what about
Yeah.
today? There's no mail delivery. There's,
Yeah.
And you're
Everybody's
fixed
off.
it.
I just want to say you're right in this extent. Donald Trump is the only president in our history who never held public office of any kind, elective, appointive, or military. Because being a general is a public office. I mean, you're part of the government. You're not elected,
yeah.
but you're part of the government. You're
Yeah.
your general commanding the army. He's the only president who never served in any of those positions before he became president of the United States.
Yeah.
But now he serves for all of them.
Yeah. Got
Yeah.
the highest office in the world.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny how the mind works sometimes. I could bring up another point of trivia. So, talking about President Trump and his accomplishments and all this, of course, he has seated 2 justices on the Supreme Court. In recent coverage on the news, I see old pictures. I said this to my wife. I see old pictures of the Supreme Court. I mean, just within the last week, if I didn't see 2 of them, and where is Justice Kavanaugh?
That's strange.
How could
Okay,
that?
the
How could that?
pictures.
I even photographed my photo, with my phone, and that, maybe it's no accident or something, but we all know with the battle he fought and everything, Justice Kavanaugh is a just one of our justices.
If you think of it, Clarence Thomas, you very seldom see individual pictures of him.
Oh, individual.
Together, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
You
he
know,
has-
all
to
you
stay in the
hear
background.
Yeah,
about,
he has.
Yeah,
he will
yeah.
not. I mean, he was so bitter over the way he was treated in
Oh,
those
yeah.
hearings.
Rightfully so.
When you think about it, that's nearly 30 years ago. It's a long time.
Right.
That was in the beginning of the 1990s. But he was so bitter at the way he was treated that he does his job. I mean, he's there, but he doesn't look for the limelight. He doesn't do interviews. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't give I don't think he gives speeches. He just does his job as a justice of the Supreme Court.
There's a program on C-SPAN on the weekends. It's history. And every once in a while, they'll have justices of the Supreme Court, and they'll talk to him every once in a while. But they were talking about the last Chief Justice of the Supreme Court when Clinton was president. And
Oh, that was Rehnquist. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Rehnquist.
he was the judge in that
The Senate trial.
Senate trial, and they asked him about that. He says that was the only job I got paid for not doing anything. And he says, but I did a very good job
he
of
said-
doing
nothing.
He said, my job was to do nothing, and I did it very well.
right.
Well, we'll see if Roberts follows suit.
I
you
think
know,
we will.
all we
Well,
hear
the
about
thing about
today
that,
in the papers is about Prince Harry and that deal, and nobody thinks to look the other way and see what
Right.
just happened in Hawaii.
That's right.
2
Yeah,
coppers were shot and
Yeah.
killed,
One, and then the one responding and it was shot.
and
second
they're
officer had a
burning the
Hawaiian
place
name.
down.
Yeah.
What in the hell is happening? I mean, Hawaii, where everybody thought that was just a
Right.
place where everything was so clean and
Right.
And
and
I would
neat.
suspect that Hawaii has among the strictest gun control laws in the country. I'm going to gamble they're as
Sure.
tough as New York or any of the states we think of as having. I would think Hawaii, which has been a Democratic stronghold for many, many years, I'm sure they have very rigid gun control laws.
It's almost as rigid as Chicago.
So what good does it do?
It
Then
doesn't do any good. Yeah,
you know,
look at Chicago.
when-
That's,
They
you
have to
know,
enforce it.
And here in Illinois, they always say, well, what good does it do us to have gun control when they can go across the line from Indiana? Well, what state did they come across the line from in Hawaii?
That's right.
What was the neighboring, what adjoining state did they come to in Hawaii? I don't seem to picture how many states there are bordering the state of Hawaii.
And laws are only for people who,
They can't use that argument.
no,
in
but
Hawaii.
they're for people who are, they're not criminals. Criminals couldn't care less about the law.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to. You're willing to murder somebody, but you're not going to be willing to break a gun control law. You're not
Right.
going to break a law that says you're not entitled. But
Yeah,
you're willing to use the gun to kill someone.
And how many criminals go to a gun shop and buy a gun? It's all.
It's absurd. It's absurd.
I'm pretty sure I heard on my wife dropped me off here today, and of course I insisted she wear blindfold. But,
Or I want to
Good,
commend
good,
you.
good,
That's great.
Yeah.
You read
Thank
the
you.
memo about that. I'm glad you got that memo. Thank
but
you.
I'm pretty sure I heard on the radio we had 60 shootings this weekend, 3 fatalities, but 60 shootings.
Yeah.
What did they have? Did they have that in Iraq or in Afghanistan? Or not? But Chicago is just off the charts with
Any
these
other
things.
city?
You
Yeah.
talk about you had your wife doing a blindfold. I always, I always say it's amazing how well I can drive with my eyes closed.
Yeah. Well, I told her drive slow, of course.
You know,
When they
gentlemen,
had that shooting in Colorado, remember some years ago in the theater when there were like
Yeah.
14 people shot?
Yeah.
I said at the time, that's a typical weekend in Chicago.
Yeah.
That's not big news in
Yeah.
Chicago. 14 people shot.
you know,
Yeah.
gentlemen, what really broke my heart last night when I was sitting watching television, watching the news. Saturday night, there was a police officer that did a big fundraiser in Berwyn for a gentleman
yes.
that was homeless, didn't have any food, and he was really a veteran, and which really hurts that a veteran has no place to go, no food to eat, and it's just as lonesome as a bird sitting on top of a tree in the middle of winter. And this police officer from Berwyn went out and did a big fundraiser and helped this gentleman, and I thought that was great. Last night I'm sitting watching the television, and here I find out that a Berwyn police officer got killed. Some stupid accident because the driver was DUI.
Yeah, he was off duty. He was right.
He was off duty, but the moral of the story is, gentlemen, he is the police officer. He was a gentleman trying to help people, and they said that he was 33 years old. Was that the
That's- yeah.
age? 10 years on the force. He was very well liked by his fellow workers. So on one hand, they got a police officer that helped somebody, and on the other hand, they lost within 24 hours. And in December, up in on Route 12 and Route 120, there was a major accident up there. Also, a truck driver went out of control, and the Lake Sheriff police were out there directing traffic and trying to get people around it. And some DUI went around, hit one of the sheriffs and killed him a couple days before Christmas. And that is just, and years ago, and now Bill, I know you're going to remember this. Years ago, just a couple days before Christmas, there was a big accident on the Dan Ryan Expressway at 47th Street. The Hook and Ladder Truck Company in that area there went down there for the accident, and the lieutenant, or I don't know if he was lieutenant or captain, I forget what rank he was. Lieutenant, he got out of the truck. He was going to walk around to go to the scene of the accident, and some guy comes shooting down 47th Street, hit and killed the lieutenant. What was his name? Gillen, wasn't it?
Scott's Law.
Pardon?
Scott's Law. they
Yeah,
call it.
yeah. And at that time was just a few days before Christmas. And at that time I was president of the 511 Club. And the 511 Club always, for any member of the Chicago Fire Department that gets killed in the line of duty, we have, the firebox that sits on the street corner. We have a florist in Lombard that makes a floral piece that's the shape of that firebox. And always the president of the club, which I was at that time, presents that floral piece to the family. And I had gone to the wake, and I presented the firebox or the floral piece to the family, and they was little kids, I'd say maybe 5, 6, 7 years old. And as they were sitting in the chair across from the casket, one of the kids said, "Mommy, why is Daddy there? Why isn't Daddy sitting with us?" And I tell you, friends, that broke my heart. And every time, regardless what day of the month it is, what month of the year it is, whenever, when I hear a police officer or firefighter that gets killed in the line of duty, or like this Berwyn police officer yesterday, it just breaks my heart. I mean, but when those kids said, "Mommy, why is Daddy there, not sitting with us?" That just hurt me to no end.
The state trooper died of the same way here not too
Yes,
long ago.
that's
John.
right. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember his name right offhand, but
They
they dedicated that place to him too.
That's right. They just had that last week or a week or two ago.
Yeah.
Bill.
You know, Bill, I know, we all remember the tragic loss of your son, John Kugelman, who paid the ultimate price as he was working in uniform, marked squad car. And I know in later years they ultimately dedicated the highway to him. But it's not the average person that can fill those shoes. And it's law enforcement or the fire profession is not for the average person. I don't know if that is to say that you have a special gene or whatever, but we're human beings. We have families, to John's point. We have families, and we all want to go home at night. But your son, John Kugelman, rest his soul, he paid the ultimate price too.
You know, I spent that 46 years in the fire department and retired as a chief of the 10th Battalion, and I'm not going to say I'm proud of it, but I guess I am. That may not be the right word, but I didn't lose anybody.
Yeah.
When I was a chief.
Forgive me, and we have to interrupt at this point. We will be back, and now our announcer, Rich Lang.
We'll be right back after these messages of interest and importance.
From pain? Do you know someone that has constant pain of their low back, neck, shoulder, knee, or wrist? Have they tried medications, exercise, physical therapy, or chiropractic, and nothing seemed to make it better? Well, I may have your answer. Why not try a napropath? Hi everybody, this is Dr. Wayne Chickowitz, and I've been practicing 30 years treating pain. I'm board certified and hold a diplomate in pain management. For your convenience, we have 2 locations. In Cicero, 3602 South 61st Avenue, 708-656-7000, or in Villa Park at 122 West St. Charles Road, Suite 1A, 630-833-4007. Why not try a napropath and stop the pain today?
Now, back to our discussion. John?
Thank you very much, Rich, and we're beginning our second hour. Let's go around the table once again and give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves to you, and I'll start with Rich Lang, our announcer. Rich?
I am your announcer, Rich Lang.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not your announcer, Don.
You're the non-announcer.
I'm Dennis Fitzgerald, retired Chicago policeman, 33 years. I was honored to serve, and the retirement's a good time. In my retirement, I find myself heading up the Police Council of the Knights of Columbus, and very unique council. I invite people to surf into our website and take a look at us. I think you'll be impressed with what you see. And that website is knights12173.us, with a membership from 50 plus suburbs. Totally unheard of. Our members come from far north, far south, as far west as Yorkville, which is about an hour and 15-minute ride west, and McHenry. And actually, we have members in our council from 7 other states. I don't know if they're snowbirds or whatever, but pretty unique council. So surf in. Bill?
It is a unique council. Yeah, and I'm Bill Kugelman again, and I started to say before, after all the time I spent on the job and as chief for a lot of that time, I never lost anybody. Made sure that everybody got home the next day. A lot of guys hurt, but that's part of the job, I guess. But that was one of the things I'm very proud of. That never lost anybody, and I know there's other chiefs that have lost a lot of not a lot of, but have lost some of their members, and it's just a good feeling that I have for that.
You know, Bill, if I could add, John, if I could add, so one of the founding members of the bagpipe band, the Pipes and Drums of the Emerald Society, the Chicago Police Department. And when we started in 1982, we offered the service of, we play for policemen and firemen killed in a line of duty. And each and every time I would add a black satin ribbon, with gold letters on it, the officer's name, firefighter's name, and when they're killed in a line of duty. And way too many of those funerals I've been to. And I know different houses and all that. The house over at Belmont and Cicero in their shadow box with the chrome axes and all that. But there were 2 firemen there that perished in that fire. But over the years, it's the profession takes its toll. You know, I remember one time I was working with a guy. He was fire and he switched to police. His family, his wife, was kind of insistent on it. He fell off the roof, head first, into the old garbage cans, the old metal 55-gallon drums. And he told me one time, Shanahan was his last name, I seem to recall. He said that wasn't terribly bad because the garbage cushioned his entry. But upon entry, he broke both of his arms.
Ooh.
And he said the real painful thing is when they come to take him out, lifted him out, you know.
God,
But
imagine.
so he transferred to police. I don't know how smart of a move that was. But, yeah, they pay a very dear price.
This last bunch that came on the fire department, I don't remember how many there were, maybe 150 or something like that, John. 20 were Chicago police. Changing
For
over.
Pete's sake.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
they switched over.
I always, when I was president of the union and I, go down and talk to them, I always wanted to know, hey, any coppers here, raise your hand. And they're always,
Wow.
Yeah.
I was driving by the old fire academy, I shouldn't say the old fire academy the other day on Jefferson. We just come from Manny's.
Oh, boy.
Does that look familiar?
Oh, yeah, it sure does.
That's Manny's Reuben sandwich. The
Reuben
corned beef is
sandwich.
literally the same.
Yeah.
But
I'm curious, oh, God.
Wow.
that's all corned beef.
Yeah.
That's a meal.
I'll be there Wednesday night.
Wednesday night?
Wednesday night.
They had their meeting there.
Yeah.
Did you ask for a slightly larger one? I mean, what would they say if you asked for
This is the one size.
And then you get a latke with it.
Yeah.
Get
Yeah.
a pancake.
Yeah. But so we drove at the end of the block, the fire academy. What is the status of the fire
I'm
academy?
just going to ask. What
Is
are
it going to stay
What
there?
are they
You know
gonna
what?
do with it
No-
when they build this new or they're building, or have they completed?
No,
the
they
new
haven't.
complex?
They haven't started anything.
Is it
yet.
historic
And
in
that-
some way, shape, or form?
Oh, our fire academy is. That's where the fire started in
That's where Mrs.
1871.
O'Leary's- That's
558
Dakota
Oh, yeah.
Street. That's where
Yeah.
Mrs. O'Leary's
Yeah.
house was.
Oh, yeah.
I think it would be a terrible thing to
That's right.
give
Yeah.
that place up.
You're right.
If they want it bigger, well, make it bigger then.
I think that's all that's left of DeKoven Street in the city
Yes,
of
it
Chicago.
is.
I don't
Yeah.
think
Short
DeKoven
Street.
Street exists anywhere else except that little strip where the fire academy.
That's
I know,
right.
I've been there a lot.
Yeah,
It goes
that's right.
between Jefferson
That's
and
pretty
Clinton.
filling.
It's basically
Oh, yeah.
a driveway for a parking lot now, but
That's a hungry man's corned beef.
but it is.
Nice lean meat, too.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I certainly hope they preserve. I've been to the muster several times, and that academy is a very historic building, and it's at a historic location.
Right.
Right.
So I hope the city will preserve that in some way, at least maybe maintain the museum there, even if the academy goes somewhere else.
Oh,
Is there a
we had-
great need for
we
a
had thought
modeling or
about
expansion
that.
of the fire academy?
Oh, I don't know that.
Say what, Rich?
I say, is there a great need for expanding or remodeling the fire academy? There's a
I
need.
don't know. I don't
Yeah,
think
it
so.
seems
Big
to be.
facility.
Yeah.
You wonder-
Relatively new
you have to
facility,
wonder
yeah,
Why they
yeah.
need something, because it looks to me like
Well, they want to
very-
combine, I guess, on the west side
Police
where
and
they build
fire.
a new police
Police and
academy,
fire.
combine it with fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's another issue then. Yeah.
There could be some politician that's got property over there in
you
Chicago
go.
Avenue.
In
Yeah.
Chicago?
It's a
Oh.
Chicago.
They
Now
would
we're gonna go into
never-
overtime.
It would never happen in the city of Chicago. You must be talking about some other community.
We're going to go into overtime.
Yeah, Lincoln would.
The ironic thing about Mrs. O'Leary, her barn burned down, but her house didn't.
No.
And
Okay.
she got a lot of flack from that.
The cow only burned down the barn, not the.
Remember that great movie in Old Chicago?
Yeah,
Right.
With Tyrone Power and Don Amici.
Don Amici, yeah. Don Amici.
Pretty good movie for its day, the
He's the mayor of
effects.
Chicago.
Yeah.
Don Amici's the mayor.
I
Little
kinda
known in
laughed.
history,
I was
yeah.
watching it. They showed a background check of the city burning, and the road that they were taking it from was going downhill. I said, I don't remember that many hills in Chicago.
Sounds like San
Well,
Francisco. Yeah.
They used to. I remember in the '60s they would do these shows that would supposedly take place in Chicago, and occasionally you'd do a shot, and you could see the mountains off in the distance.
Or palm trees.
Mount,
or,
yeah, Mount Daly and Mount Kennelly.
You can
and-
always tell it's Chicago if you see the fire hydrants.
That's right.
There's only one city that's got a
our,
fire
our
hydrant,
style of hydrant.
and that's Chicago.
Well, they always think they can make it look like Chicago by having the police officers wear the checkerboard band.
That's right.
Yeah.
They have the checker. They figure that makes it look like Chicago.
Sure. You know,
Either that or London, because they got the same bands.
The British, yeah.
Yeah,
That's where O.W. Wilson got the idea.
I,
W. Wilson.
I was talking one time. It was called a tri-county dinner, and so that was the makeup of it. But one of the guest speakers was a Bobby from London, and so it was a good turnout here. And I was talking about the band, and actually we would have an annual banquet for 1,000 people. So I was spreading the word. But in part of my delivery, I would fan out these satin ribbons of all the funerals that we honored, and the Bobby was so taken by it. But of course, we're talking about two different cultures, you know, and I guess still to this day, their officers aren't armed, only with special permissions.
That's what I hear.
But
Yeah.
more and more of them now, because of the changing
Right.
times.
Yeah,
More and
yeah, that-
I
Yeah.
think maybe all of them, or certainly many of them, are trained in the use of a firearm. It's still not just part of their standard equipment the way it
Okay,
is of a
that makes
police.
sense.
But they have plenty of police that.
Yeah.
And there are police available, so if something happens, there's someone not far by that has a firearm.
I was going back many years, probably 30 years ago or so.
Oh yeah, there was a
I
time when they were proud of the
references.
fact that the only weapon they carried was a nightstick.
Yeah.
That's all they carried was the what we call a billy club. The trivia question: does anyone know why English or London police officers are called bobbies? Because
One of the superintendents in the past? or
no,
something like
no,
that?
it was a prime minister. Prime
Oh,
minister in the
okay.
19th century, a Tory conservative prime minister named Robert Peel.
Peel.
Robert
Okay.
Peel, in the 1820s, created the London Police Department. There had not been a municipal police department in London.
Right.
And he was pushed through the legislation in Parliament that created the London Police Force. And in his honor, Sir Robert Peel, they were known as, they would refer to, who are those guys? Oh, those are Bobby's guys. That's Bobby's idea. They're also known as peelers. You don't hear that as often
not
today.
really.
But for many years, they were also referred to as peelers.
Peelers, huh?
In memory of Robert Peel. In fact, there's a movie called, that movie about Rorke's Drift, the battle that was fought in Africa. Zulu. The name of the movie is Zulu.
Ooh, Mike O'Kane.
You may remember that movie. There's a couple. There's a couple of the soldiers they're in the brig for some infraction, and there's this South African guy. They're in an odd uniform, and they say, who are you, chum? And he says, I'm Sergeant McDuff, Natal Mounted Police. The guy says, Mounted Police? You hear that, Jimmy? A peeler. Come to arrest the Zulus. So that's one time where you do hear that word peeler used in the movie. If you ever see the movie
Interesting.
again, watch for that.
Well,
A peeler. Come to arrest the Zulus.
That's sort of like the Chicago
funny.
Coppers because of their buttons.
Coppers.
Copper buttons,
Coppers,
yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or constable on patrol, hence
Yeah.
the acronym,
Cop.
But it's funny how the origin of some of those words, for a squad car, you might hear different references, but unique to the profession.
Right.
You
and
know.
You say a squad roll. What the heck
Squad
is that?
roll.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a paddy wagon. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Paddy's wagon.
Like I know.
They used to have a term, the Black Mariah. I've heard that term, a Black Mariah.
Yeah,
for
that's
a
an old one.
police
Probably the
vehicle.
black and white squad
Mariah.
cars.
Yeah.
I heard that
I've
one.
heard that in old movies, they say
Yeah.
Black
I think that was something from New York.
Yeah,
Yeah.
could be.
Right.
Could be. I remember when I was in Philadelphia, in their municipal museum, and actually they had a wing devoted to police and fire, the history of their police and fire departments. And in the United States, police departments didn't really get organized on a real footing until after the Civil War. And most of the guys that went into police were Civil War veterans. And you see the uniforms, they looked like Civil War soldiers. The officers had swords, the lieutenants and the captains had swords.
Wow.
And they had, they had the shoulder boards with the epaulets, the old style epaulets. Yeah. So they really reflected, what the military looked like in the Civil War. That was where the uniforms, because there hadn't been a police force in Philadelphia before that. So they copied pretty much what they had in the Army.
And a lot of people don't realize Chicago has 2 police departments. You got the police department and the Park District Police.
Yeah, they used to. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that Don, they
not
were
The
just-
Park District
been a-
Police still exists, but they hire off-duty Chicago police officers, from what I understand.
There hasn't been a...
Oh, I didn't know there was any separation still at all. That's
I
interesting.
thought
Yeah,
there
I used to work park police in my retirement. It was a secondary job, but I don't know. I
They had
don't know.
different
They
police
still
cars
exist
and
around.
everything.
They
Oh, yeah.
used to.
Yeah.
Prior to 1960, they had their own uniformed police force. They had their own lockup. I guess the building over at Augusta and Sacramento, the gray brick building on the southwest corner, originated from being an old lockup. And there were certain ordinance, certain laws relative to boulevards, which the park police would enforce. But your reference to them now, so I did work park security. And we were law enforcement. We were armed and all. Yeah, I never thought of them as being the same.
I remember, I don't know if they were officers or not, but the
Yeah.
ones I remember, they had white shirts and bow ties.
Well, I don't know
The
about the bow
cops.
ties.
And the reason they had their own police department is because all the parks were connected by boulevards,
True.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
and they were and they had jurisdiction there.
Yeah.
And to the day, you're not supposed to drive a truck on a boulevard
Yeah.
for that reason.
Yeah, supposedly. Yeah, they're headquartered out of the old Meigs Field, I believe. And Chicago, I'm rusty on it, but Chicago has a lot of parks, a lot of acreage, and a lot of valuable resources. The golf course at 63rd and out south there, and but a lot of valuable resources. So we're the first to be called if there's a break-in, entry, or whatever. The alarms are triggered, and then if need be, then we'd call the other police. But I haven't been with them for a number of years.
I wonder what happened in the late 50s for the merger to come about. What brought that about?
Yeah, I don't know,
yeah.
Rich.
Gotta research that.
Politics or
The
something.
historian will
I
research
know
that.
it was a very political
Yeah.
organization. My brother-in-law was a Park District copper,
Yeah.
and
Well, when they disbanded, a lot of guys switched over to the
No,
city.
I
police.
that was a jumping spot to get to the city.
Well,
yeah.
didn't the,
Yeah.
the city have a housing project police too?
That's true. They had Chicago Special Police.
Yeah.
So in my early years, when I come out in the late '60s, so Lake Street was all lined. Those things aren't there anymore. But Lake Street was all lined with projects, high rises,
Right.
13-story buildings. On my days off, I'd work Cabrini Green in the adjoining district, going east, and then the State Street had a string of high rises. But they finally realized I think those have all been torn down throughout probably all the major cities in the country. When they became popular, they all sprouted up. But you cannot have that many people under one roof, and the gangs controlled them, and it was just a poor situation.
The only ones that I remember, and I haven't been there in a while, along, let's see, what was it? It was along Taylor Street, I think it was. And they had some original housing projects that were just 2 stories.
Yes.
And
The
there's,
low
I think,
levels.
maybe a half a block. They're all boarded up now, and there's
yeah.
fences around it. But
Yeah.
I think those are the only ones that still exist that I can remember.
over in the old 19th district. They're still around there, but
It's
why I spent so much time in those projects, and
Oh yeah.
and
There's
it
something around
always
this-
seemed that
this
the
Mersey on the
elevators were
river.
broke too.
I think are quartered
Yeah.
down.
Sure.
I think there's some dispute as to what the oldest organized police force in the United States is, but one of the claimants is a unit that I learned about when I went to Washington, D.C., and it's the United States Capitol Police. The Capitol building has its own police force,
Yes.
which is responsible for the Capitol building and the grounds immediately surrounding the Capitol building. And it was founded in, I think, 1828, if I'm not mistaken. I've got a patch at home. is that when I was in Washington many years ago, I struck up a conversation with one of the officers, and I told him that I was chairman of the Fire and Police Committee in my town. I was involved with the auxiliary police. So he took me on a private tour of the Capitol building. He took me to things that are not part of the public tour. He took me down into the basement and showed me the catafalque that had been built for Abraham Lincoln, where Lincoln's body lay in state. And every subsequent president who has lain in state in the Capitol has used that catafalque. And it's kept down there in a crypt. And the crypt is where George Washington was supposed to have been buried. When they built the Capitol building, the architects thought that George Washington, when he died, would be buried beneath the Capitol building. But when Washington died, his family did not want him in the Capitol. They want him buried on his estate at Mount Vernon. So they have this crypt that was designed for George Washington with nothing to put there. So they have the catafalque, the Lincoln catafalque is kept there. So he showed me this, but I have a patch of the U.S. Capitol Police, and they are one of the claimants to be the oldest police force in the United States, going back to the 1820s.
One of the
Wow, that's
ex Chicago Police, ex-director of the Illinois State Police,
Right.
went there, Terry Gaynor.
Terry
yeah.
Gaynor.
And Terry's quite a guy. It's a very close friend of mine, and that whole family has got has been very successful in law.
I met him when I was in Springfield. He was the director of the state police,
yeah.
the chief of the state police at
Yeah.
that time.
And Terry's supposed to join our council of the Knights of Columbus.
Oh.
Let me inject
Oh,
that.
go right on,
Oh,
right.
good.
Go ahead. Yeah.
You tell him I
Yeah.
told him to do that.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What surprised me, this was a few years ago. We were in Washington, D.C., and the FBI has got marked squad cars.
Oh, today, yeah. Oh, sure.
Okay, that's interesting.
Oh, sure. Well, you see them now where they have the flak jackets with FBI on
Right.
it, and so
But these were,
they're not uniform per se, but I mean they're visible to the public as to
Right.
You know,
they're
here's
the
something I
FBI.
saw the other day, and I didn't realize that they made it a little bit more than it actually is. But the unions have this huge rubberized rat that they put anywhere there's a anti-union group working, and it's really neat. I mean the thing has got to be what 20 feet high or something, 15, 20 feet high, and it's have you ever seen that, Den?
No.
Oh yeah, it's something. Any place where there's scabs working, why? They
Oh,
have
yeah,
this.
the rat. Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
and then I looked over, and here's a couple of guys parked there, and they've got a SUV, and it's all painted up, and it's got Rat Patrol.
That's good.
when they were trying to unionize Walt Disney World, they couldn't wear them on the property, but you see them walking around Orlando, and they had a big T-shirt with a rat with mouse ears,
Oh,
and it says Mickey is a rat.
Bill, do you have any idea when the first professional fire department began? Professional. It's amazing how long the fire was guarded by so-called volunteers around the country.
Oh, it was
Well, Chicago was
quite
in the late
1858.
1800s.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, I think after Civil War for Chicago.
Because the big fire was 1871.
Right, maybe
Right.
that was the impetus.
And there was some full time, of course,
Yeah.
and then
even that, okay.
but it was
Yeah, mix,
mostly
yeah.
volunteers.
1858 was the first paid one in the city, correct?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
That
Yeah.
monument,
but
at,
there weren't that many of them.
Oh.
You know.
Wow.
that monument at the cemetery, that pillar,
Rose Hill?
that's from the 1850s, if I don't.
It was
if I'm not
volunteer,
mistaken.
I
That was,
think.
that was still a volunteer fire department
Right.
when that tragedy took place that they commemorate with that.
And before that, the insurance companies funded fire departments. That's why they call it fire companies. Because
That makes sense.
if you didn't have a plaque on the front of your house, that
You paid your dues.
yeah, if you didn't,
That's it.
bye.
Yeah,
One of my favorite police stories. I heard this on a radio show some years ago, and that is during World War II when the Germans were guarding the west wall, the Atlantic Wall, and expecting the Allied invasion. As the word spread that one of the American units that was going to land in the invasion were going to be the Rangers. The Americans were going to send Rangers against them. And this caused a great deal of consternation amongst the Germans because they thought it meant the Texas Rangers. They had seen the movies. They had seen
That
the
would be
movies
a-
about these
Yeah.
invincible guys in the Texas Rangers. And they thought that was coming to what was coming against them, the Texas. They didn't know it was a U.S. Army unit called the Rangers.
Right.
But this apparently was a big deal for a while that the Texas Rangers were going to land on at the invasion of Europe.
Led by Tom Mix or somebody
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, or Joel McRae. You know.
And a lot of people don't realize there was no Marines on the invasion of Europe because they
No.
were all in the South
No,
Pacific.
no. There were in World War I. There were Marines that fought in Europe. There were Marine
Right.
units in the First World War, but not in World War II. I mean, I'm sure there were. You hear stories that there was this, Marine sergeant. There probably were individual Marines that went
Right.
to Europe as advisors or special units or something. But no, there were no divisions or regiments.
They must have been
No.
Corrigans. They went the
No,
wrong way.
the Pacific was the Navy's war, and the
Right.
Marines are an adjunct. They're part of the Navy department, so they did their fighting in the Pacific. We'll be marking. We're going to be coming up this year on the 7th. In fact, let's see. I think it's in February or March. The Iwo Jima, the famous landing at Iwo Jima. That was in 1945. So we'll be I'm almost certain that's in February. We'll mark the 75th anniversary of the landing at Iwo Jima.
And that was returned back to Japan, right?
Well, that was on the road. That was on the road to Japan.
No, but I mean,
Okinawa.
didn't the Americans fairly recently give it back to Japan?
Oh yeah, it was not recent. It was in the 1970s. It was like
And
1972.
from what I understand, the only day they can fly the American flag is on that day.
They put up. I saw pictures at the time. They put up a monument with a copper American flag. There's a copper American flag that looks like a flag. It's not. It's not flying, but it's from a pole. But because it was being turned over to the Japanese, they didn't want to fly. I don't know why they couldn't have simply agreed that we would continue to fly the American flag at this monument.
Because there's a monument
There is a
with
monument.
the guys
yeah,
with
Mount
the
Suribachi.
flagpole
yeah,
up there.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, there's only one day a year they can fly an American flag.
I've never heard that. That maybe I've never heard that. They don't have a recreation of the famous scene. That's at Arlington Cemetery. They've got a huge Marine memorial at Arlington Cemetery of the guys planting the flag. But I saw pictures of it, and they had this kind of little. I'm saying little. They had a monument on Mount Suribachi, and there was a pole with a copper American flag, suspended from it, so that nominally there'd be an American flag flying. But I don't know why we didn't just, it seems to me we could have just kept it. I mean, it was turned over so much back to the Japanese, we could have theoretically kept that one island.
You mentioned you referenced the Arlington National Cemetery. My nephew is the commandant there.
Ah.
No.
What a prestigious assignment.
Oh, wow.
Assigned to Pentagon, but that's his duty assignment is Arlington National. So he's a chaplain. He's a commander for the Navy and the Marine Corps. He heads up those two. So then I guess the other branches have their command personnel there.
Must be.
Right.
But he showed me, different pictures of him graveside, folding the flag, and
Right.
even though he's a commander, but then also with the horses, bringing the caissons in and
It's
that.
called the Old Guard.
The
The
third
old guard.
The old
yeah.
guard. Oh,
Third
it's-
Infantry Regiment.
It's really
Third
something to
Infantry
see.
Regiment.
Yeah,
Right.
but what an assignment!
No, that's something.
I-
Very
good-
proud of him.
Very
Yeah.
good friend of mine and of everybody. He was the pastor of Our Lady of Victory, OLV, Chris Doring,
Oh,
and he was assigned there.
to Arlington.
Doring at
Yeah,
Arlington,
yeah.
and now he's with the 82nd Airborne.
Oh,
What a guy he is.
Right.
The Old Guard wears as part of their uniform. They have the fourragère cord on their shoulder as part of the uniform. I think there are other units which will use that cord as a decoration or an
Right.
award to individual soldiers. But the Third Regiment, which is the Old Guard, it's part of the uniform. Every member of the unit
Right.
wears that so-called fourragère French
Right.
cord. It's a braided cord around one of your shoulders,
And
and that's part of the uniform.
The mansion was Robert E. Lee's home.
Right.
Oh yeah,
Right.
yeah. You
Yeah.
see that on
Yeah.
the
That's
tour.
ironic.
What
Mhm.
was his his wife's name, Lee Custis.
Custis.
Custis is
She
in
was
that,
related.
that's
She was related to the
George
Washingtons.
Washington's
Yeah.
granddaughter.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And when they were burying when they decided to turn the estate into a cemetery, they buried the fallen right up to the doorstep because they wanted to make sure that the Lees could never come back and turn it into an estate again,
Right.
a residence again.
They said the closest
They're
he,
buried
wa-
right
he
up.
was to it. He said he was on a train going
Yeah, he
by
saw
and
it.
he could see
He
it.
never actually returned there
No.
after the war. He never, but saw it from a train when he was
Right.
going somewhere. Yeah.
Is that Lee Mansion still standing? I
Oh yeah,
totally
yeah.
forgot.
Oh, yeah,
It
it's part
is.
of the tour. Yeah, when you take the
right,
tour
right.
of
Historic
Arlington,
landmark.
they
Yeah.
they
Totally
take you
forgot.
into the
Augustus
mansion.
Lee Mansion. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Custis Lee Mansion.
It was originally his daughter's or his wife's.
Yeah, it was her family.
Her family.
Yeah, it wasn't his by
And
inheritance.
then he
It was-
kind of
yeah.
inherited by marriage.
Yeah.
This National Cemetery down south here now is getting to be quite a place too. They call it the what is it, the Lincoln?
You mean here in Illinois, the one out?
It's just south
Yeah,
of.
way south of the Loop.
Yeah.
Way south.
No, it's-
Lincoln National Cemetery.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lincoln,
Yeah.
Illinois. I
Yeah.
think.
That's a huge place.
Yeah. Well, I think we're coming up on our next break, so we're glad to have you here. We've got 1 hour left. We've an hour and a half under the belt, as they say, and 1 hour to go. So I'll turn to our ace announcer.
Now it's time for another brief intermission. You're listening to Meet the Chicago Historians.
Well, friends, even though today is the month of January, January the 20th, it won't be long, another couple months, and we're going to be getting into spring. And of course, spring brings rainy weather. And you want to make sure that your roof, siding, and gutters is in good shape for when we get the rainy weather. You don't want mildew or mold in your attic or crawl space. You don't want your walls damaged by leaky gutters. So the best thing to do right now is to pick up your phone and call Best Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters and have Mike Besh come out, look at your roof, look at your siding, look at your gutters, give you an estimate, and be prepared to get everything taken care of before the rainy weather comes. And from what I hear, this spring we're supposed to get another terrible rainy season. So be sure the roof, siding, and gutters are in good shape. Like I said before, you don't want mold or mildew in your attic or crawl space, or you don't want drip, drip, drip on your ceilings in your rooms, or have your walls damaged by leaky gutters or bad siding. Don't have double expense. Sooner or later, you're going to have to get it repaired. So now is the time to call Best Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters for a free estimate. Mike Best will come out in his shiny red truck with ladders on top, give you an estimate, and go from there. So, Best Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters, give them a call at 630-616-1359. That's Best Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters, area code 630-616-1359. Again, Best Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters, area code 630-616-1359. Call today for a free estimate and be ready for when the rainy season approaches in another month or two.
Now back to our special January edition of Meet the Chicago Historians. John?
Thank you very much, Rich Lang, our announcer, and we're glad to be with you on this rather rather chilly day. It's not as bad as we had anticipated. We've dodged a number of bullets this year. We've had predictions of weather that turned out not to be quite as bad as last several weekends. We've had some snow and some cold, and we did have a bout of cold weather over the weekend. But we cannot complain. We cannot complain about the weather. We've had unbelievably a good run of weather now since really November, since that snow in Halloween. We had that freak snow around Halloween. And
I think that's still our heaviest snow of the year
yeah,
so far.
truly
Yeah,
the weather's
yeah,
been
yeah.
fine ever since, so we were in no position to complain. It's not that bad out there today.
Yeah, so that one.
We may get another bit of inclement weather this coming weekend. So we're here talking about a variety of things. We're talking about a number of subjects. I know you've mentioned about the Knights of Columbus. I have to acknowledge I'm a 4th degree Knight of Columbus, as I'm sure you are a 4th.
Oh, very good. Yes,
Knight
John.
Knight
Yeah.
of Columbus.
Yeah.
And like many of the Knights of Columbus, I'm not happy about what has happened to the uniform, what they used to call the regalia,
Yes.
as they put it, which is a little bit of a misnomer because regalia is what a king wears.
Yeah.
But they call it the regalia of the 4th degree, and they've made a change to make it a much less impressive display than traditional.
Well, I'll tell you, John, they've done a couple of things that are really, really noteworthy and really revolutionary, so to speak. The changing of the uniform was a hard sell. I was 4th degree. I joined in the late fall of '79 when the Pope came to Chicago, and I fast-tracked it right up to 4th degree. And, and over the years, I've done a number of honor guards, this, that, and the other. But as of June 30th, that old uniform, that old regal uniform, ostrich plumage, red satin cape and a saber, cape, chapeau, and saber. And so now it's a beret and white gloves and the saber, but it's their suit coat with a medallion on the pocket.
The old uniform is forbidden now. You cannot.
That's right.
That's right.
There's no option or.
Right, and even per a request, you can't honor that request to be in
seems
the old
strange.
uniform. I suspect you could probably have it laid out on a casket,
Yeah.
but that would be understandable. But
Dennis?
most recently, we lost a council member, legendary person in Chicago, truly was, Ed Wadnicki. He was a deputy chief in the police department. Then he went on to another distinguished career with the Cook County Sheriffs. But Ed and his son still serves on the Chicago Police Department. Fine person that he is. But so we wanted to honor Ed. He was 4th degree. And so I made the request to 2 different assemblies. But what with the transition of the uniforms, bottom line is, so I turned out myself at the funeral, and the line was out the door. So I presented. I was at the casket when St. Jude had their presentation, and
the old uniform.
no, with the new uniform. No, you cannot wear that old uniform. That's the hard sell. That's the hard sell behind it.
Dennis,
What?
I have a question to ask you.
Sure, go ahead, John.
Explain to our listening audience the purpose of the Knights of Columbus, who can join, and what do they do? I mean, we talk about the Knights of Columbus,
All right,
but
very good, John.
exactly what do they do, and who can join the Knights of Columbus?
Very good. Thank you very much. And I'm routinely asked those questions. So since its inception, 1882, it was a young priest that seen the need to help the most neediest in the community. However you would envision a family back then, it was a different world, of course, but maybe a family of 12 or 14, or they huge families. Should something have happened back to the primary breadwinner, what was the family to do? So you go out to the dirt road and beg. So in any event, and amidst all of these maladies that are out there now, mental illness and so on and so on. So he came to the realization you have to help the most neediest in the community. Now, over the course of years, 138 years, they've acquired 17,500 councils, and they each bear the responsibility of helping the most neediest in the community to the extent that they can. Our little council, we have a little over 400 members. We're approaching our 22nd year, but we have 14 recognizable charities. And I frequently tell our members, you should walk out of this meeting feeling 10 foot tall for all the good that we do writing our checks. And when I say we write our checks, so we don't nickel and dime you, the dues are $40 a year. Divided by 365 days, that's less than 11 cents a day. To take pride in doing this. So if I were to rattle off some with Misericordia, Lara Beta, Special Olympics, Mental Health, Chaplain's Ministry, Gold Star Family, 100 Club, I just most recently acquired, in a manner of speaking, 3 nuns organizations. I held a point of view wherever nuns are, they have to be hanging on by a shoestring. So I researched it a little bit, and out in Stone Park, the Missionary Sisters of St. Charles Borromeo Scalabresians. They've been around for about 130 years or so. They do a lot of good work. Another one was Radio Maria, Belmont and Sayre, 6965 West Belmont. Radio Maria broadcast to Poland. Poland's about 98% Catholic. Well, they also broadcast to North America, and that is to say Mexico, United States, and Canada. They've been around for many, many years, too. They were number 2. And the third one was Mercy Home for Boys and Girls. They've been around a long, long time. I was surprised to find out the chief CEO, Father Scott Donahue. I was surprised to find out Mother Teresa processed through Mercy Home for Boys and Girls. She spent in her younger days. They've been around for a long time. And so they do a lot of good work. And so that's it. Now, who can join? Male members of the Catholic faith. You have to be 18 years old, at least 18 years old. But here's what I want to tell you. John, this is what I was referencing, dramatic change. There's 4 sequential degrees in the Knights of Columbus, first, second, third, and fourth. It used to be an hour for the first 3. An hour, an hour, an hour. They just condensed it. And we were honored to be the first ones to launch this for all of the Knights of Columbus. Can you believe this? They condensed it into about a 25-minute presentation. You join, 25 minutes later, your 3rd degree.
Oh, my.
Yeah, it's unheard of. And I'll tell you what goes part and parcel with that, John, listen to this. They always used to say it's a secret organization, as do the Elks, the Lions, and the Moose. Now they say, bring your fiancé, bring your wife, bring your family to bear witness to you joining this good organization. So they've taken the secrecy out of it. They've invited those to bear witness, and I think they're going to get a good return on this. So the logical extension of this, I said, I wonder if we could present this to the got to talk to the principal at St. Ignatius for their graduating class. Male members, 18 years or more. St. Patrick's, we'll see how that develops. But
can I just offer a
Sure.
opinion? That my opinion, I've known other organizations that
Yeah.
have tried that same thing, and it doesn't work.
Oh, okay.
You try to simplify when you're concerned about attracting more members, you
Yes.
want to get more membership, and you say, "Well, we're going to make everything simpler. We're gonna scale it back."
Yeah.
It doesn't
Lowering standards.
You wind it,
basically.
you lower your standards, as it were. You make things easier and simpler, and it
Yeah.
doesn't make any. And all you do when you do that is you upset the people who liked the way it was.
Yeah,
who
I see
believe-
what you're saying
who
there.
believe that they went through all this. Who
Yeah.
believes that it should be difficult, that there should be some, there should be some testing and
Yeah.
some hardship and some work, like saying nothing that you don't work for
Yeah.
will be appreciated as much as something for which you do work.
Yeah, understood. You make a good point there,
And
John.
when you try to simplify and I don't mean this pejoratively, dumb it down,
Yeah.
it doesn't work, because the people who didn't want to join you, they don't care whether it takes an hour to join the organization or 20 minutes to join the organization. If they don't want to join, they don't want to
Yeah.
join, and you're not. So that's just my.
I see
opinion
your
of it.
point. You make a good point, but that's how it's evolved. And we had the state officials come into we done this at St. Ferdinand's, and when they very first they honored us. They said Illinois is going to be the first one, and our council, St. Michael the Archangel Peace Council, will be the first one to launch this. So we had 42 that partook in this ceremony, and so it was a photo op and things like that. But it's a process. You got to spread the words. When you go to church nowadays, it's not as crowded as it used to be, and so these are new endeavors.
Does everybody remember when they said when we changed the Mass from Latin, which nobody understands,
Yes.
and do it in English? Oh, you're going to get more people. More people will be coming to church. Well, has that happened? Are there more people in church today than there were in the 50s when Mass was in Latin and churches were packed?
Less.
Now it's in English and churches are largely. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, I know the church does have its challenges, and to that point, I can speak best of our council. Okay, I can tell of all the good that this council does, and so we take pride in it. And the word is spreading for us. I've been able to double the attendance, the membership, in the last 3 years, and so it's in my case, it's just a thing of getting the word out and affording them insight, answering their questions, things like that. So and it's always a challenge to get young members.
It had been part of the ritual, and I imagine you can say this now. They would tell you that you do not divulge the secrets except to a knight of equal rank.
That's right.
So whenever you
that's
meet,
correct. Yeah.
immediately say, "I am a member of the first degree or of the third
Yeah.
degree." Or
Well,
what.
that's fallen by
So
the
that's
wayside.
gone now because
Yeah, that
now
is gone.
nothing is secret
Yeah,
anymore.
bring your fiance, your wife, bring
Yeah.
your family, and that's like I say, that was a big change, a huge change.
In fact, I think it's been said that the police concept that everyone has heard in the movies of giving someone the third degree, that came from the Knights of Columbus. that was derived from the
interesting.
third degree of the Knights of, which had some memorable aspects in the old days. I imagine they've done away with that.
Well, there's a lot of old uniforms out there. I don't know what they're going to be done with, what they're going to do with them.
And guys would have put in those things were expensive. Those
Well, yes,
capes,
yeah,
and
$500,
the
$600.
chapeaux,
Ostrich
expensive.
plumage.
Yeah.
Oh
And
yeah.
now they just brush it away, and then you can't use it anymore.
Yeah.
Can I go on the web and see what the different uniforms look like, old and new?
Oh
Or
sure.
have they erased the old?
No, they're still out
It's a
there.
black cape. Was this a black cape with a black, like an admiral?
Red
cap?
satin, John. Red
You'll-
satin cape.
Yeah.
Well, the black cape on
Yeah,
the
red.
outside.
And the inside was red.
Red
but
satin,
but what
yeah.
you saw on the outside, and then they had it pinned back so you could see the face.
Yeah, I've got a problem. When I hear secret society, the first thing that comes to mind is the KKK.
Right. No, you're right. You make
But
a good
which
point, Rich.
is-
That was foreign to some ears. A lot of people perked up their antennas, rightfully so. But I tell you,
Wearing capes.
the Elks, the Lions, the Moose.
That's a good point,
The
too.
same-
Those
same was
so-called
with
service
them.
organizations.
The
Yeah.
Masons.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
idea
The
was that there
Masons.
would be something
Yeah.
special. There would be something distinct.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
that was very common, I think, in the 19th century when many of these organizations originated. People wanted to be part of something special and unique that was different from everybody else.
Yeah.
And you did things that no one else knew about. That was,
Yeah.
that was a mystique.
The uniform in 1920 was the stovetop hat. So then they evolved to the Cape, Chapeau, and
Yeah.
Sabre. And so now it's seen its day, and it's replaced by the beret. So what
Yeah,
do you
what
gonna
they
do?
call
Check that out.
With
So-
an old naval officer's cap,
Yes.
with
Yeah.
the cocked like a cocked hat with
Yeah.
the
You had to have a
ostrich
special
plumes.
carrying case.
Oh yes,
But it
oh,
was
yeah.
of such,
Yeah, I got the case with the
Ostriches
sword.
are out of service now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do the Knights ever try at least to maintain a surface contact with, you might say, the Masons or the Shriners, whose goal is similar?
Very similar. You're right. I don't know that.
I've never heard of it.
They'll never join. They'll never merge. Of
Yeah,
course,
but
we would
maybe they
want
can
that,
do things
but,
in tandem.
yeah.
I don't know. You would think.
Interesting.
With the absence of knowledge, all I can say is they're very good organizations. Also, surely you see what they do at Shriners.
So that's
Those kids and all
no
that.
fan of the Shrine Circus.
Yeah,
right,
oh
yeah.
sure. But
all
so we're
remember-
one of those that do
And their
good,
temple.
good also.
That's right.
And we all remember Stan and Ollie going to the convention in Chicago of the
That's
Sons
right.
of the Desert. that was their
Must've been a
take.
secret
It was I think it was a take on the shrine, but the
Yeah,
Shriners.
yeah.
But they call them that's one of the title of the movie, Sons of the Desert.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's right. When
But
we-
all in all, if I could leave you with an invitation to surf into our website, Knights.
Yeah,
12173.us. And I do believe that we'll answer a lot of your questions. I think
Yeah.
you'll be impressed with what you see, and you'll know about our programs, and should you be interested, it'll give you contact information.
Knights 12173.
Right.
.us. .us.
For
They have
years,
them-
I
Yeah.
thought the Masons were the Bricklayers Union.
Okay.
Really?
They have a museum in New Haven, Connecticut. That's
Yes.
the national headquarters of the Knights of Columbus, and they have. I've never been there, but I've seen pictures of the
But-
museum that they
Yeah,
have. in New
21-story
Haven.
building. And
Yeah.
John, to that point, so I reference us as the police council. So when we were sanctioned, the 26th of March, 1998, we were so honored that the person in charge, the Supreme Knight, Carl Anderson, who's still in office, came to Chicago to sanction our charter. We were so honored we gave him a Chicago police uniform. And he directly and promptly installed it into the International Museum. Knights of Columbus is in 14 countries. So that's where our uniform ended up. In the other half of the story, Chicago Police Department advertises for law enforcement all throughout the country. And one time they were down in Waco, Texas. And here's a young man, I won't mention his name, but he's a graduate of Baylor University, partook in the Knights program, accelerated a 4th degree, and he bought into this new vocation of law enforcement. But since his religion was important to him, he came to Chicago via New Haven, Connecticut. And going through the museum, he sees this here uniform. He's quick to make the inquiry. What is this doing here? And he was told, well, that's from our police council in Chicago. So no sooner they got to Chicago, he got in touch with me, and since he was 4th degree, I put him on the board as a recorder. But about 8-9 months later, went through the academy, assigned to a district, and the Secret Service stole him from us. But he's still a member, because our members come from all segments of law enforcement. But that's all from an offshoot of that uniform in the museum. So we're unique, we're different, and we invite anybody interested, give a call, check us out.
And years ago, wasn't the Knights of Columbus considered more an alternative to the Boy Scouts of America?
You got me there,
I
Rich.
think so.
I don't know.
I don't.
It was
Yeah.
the Cub Scouts, actually.
Oh. Because the Boy Scouts of America have got their problems with females now.
Oh, do they
have,
ever?
So
don't
many.
They have female Boy Scouts.
Yeah. Yeah, they do.
Can
They
you have
come
male
out to
Girl
that.
Scouts?
They
I mean, it raises all
Yeah,
kinds of questions.
John, I agree with you.
Yeah. That's right.
If silence had the ears, I understood the shaking of the head. You know, the Boy Scouts was founded in 1910.
Yeah,
What
much
an
later than the,
organization.
Knights of Columbus.
All the teaching that they do. And the kids take so much pride. I was honored to be a scoutmaster in one of the role model troops in the city of Chicago. And, our lineage went back to the 1930s.
And it goes back even earlier than that in England, because scouting originated in England with Baden
Lord
Powell.
Powell.
He was the
Lord
one that,
Baden-Powell.
Lord
that created it,
Baden-Powell.
right? He was the one that created it. So it goes back, so long
yeah,
in history.
yeah.
And
Yeah. I'm an outdoorsy person. I'm a hands-on person, and what with all the crafts and challenges and camping and wilderness and all that, I was right in my element there. And I always look towards the high adventure challenges and stuff. But what a rich organization! Guaranteed 1,000 memories. Guaranteed if you stay with the program, and have your family partake. Ours was such a troop that we're going to set up here, but your family, your siblings, they can be right next to us. They can bear witness to you making breakfast. What? You've never done that at home. Well, you got to, and it's going to be meat, potatoes, and vegetable. It's going to be a good balanced breakfast and things like that. So,
The next morning they had oatmeal.
you had to submit a menu, and it had to be balanced out. It
No,
was
I mean at home.
at home. Yeah. But, things change, and I scratch my head on that one, too. I don't understand it. What a shame, what a loss.
But their goal is doing good work. Charity. That's the main thing.
That's it.
That's
Sure.
it. Yeah.
I got to run.
She
Ah.
out there?
well, thank you for giving us a bit of a
Thank you,
promo
Dennis.
on
Yeah.
the subject of the Knights of Columbus.
I hope
and
I
the
didn't
recent
bend your
changes.
ear. Yeah.
No, it's very interesting, very interesting. And I joined I joined just a few. I think I joined in 1978, so it's just about the time that you joined
The Knights? Oh.
the Knights, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I went through, the second degree, which was relatively small potatoes compared to becoming the third degree. That was
Yeah.
the big step, and then of course the fourth degree was the patriotic degree, which I'm sure they still have the fourth degree.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. No, so they'll have one coming up in
Patriotic degree.
February. Last February we had 27 members just from one council, and that's really noteworthy. Just to advance the fourth degree. It's usually out at the Hilton in Lisle, And they might have like 180 advancing. They might have like 150 in the honor guard. And they'll seat for dinner 500-600 people. So the fourth degree is still a big event. And I hope that never falls by the wayside.
No. And they still have the saber, I'm sure, the sword.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
Very good. Well, thanks for
Thank
being
you very
with
much,
us.
Dennis. Thank you.
We'll see you next month at our
Say hello to Marie.
President's Day, Lincoln, Washington edition, Valentine's Day edition.
We're gonna move it to Monday.
Vegas, and I'll be back the 15th.
Yeah, our next. For those who are interested, our next program will be on February the 17th, the third Monday of February.
The date sounds familiar for some reason.
It's the
17th.
day.
Not Lincoln's
It's the
birthday,
day
it's
after
not,
the
uh,
16th.
Washington's birthday.
No.
Yeah, before the
I can't think of anything
before the
terribly
18th.
prominent about the 17th. Washington is the 22nd, and Lincoln is the 12th, and St. Valentine is the 14th.
That's right. That's the one. Yeah.
Saint
Close to
Valentine's Day. You never see it's always referred to simply as Valentine's Day. The term.
That's an interesting transition. Yeah.
Yeah, I look upon it as kind of an echo of the the Happy Holidays conflict with
But then again,
Merry
in
Christmas.
Chicago, it has a different meaning altogether.
But if you think about it, when that famous event of Chicago history took place, it was always the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. No one calls it the Valentine's Day Massacre. It's the St.
And
Valentine's
they sure
Day
weren't any
Massacre.
saints.
No. But that was now all you see is Valentine's Day. They have separated. They've pushed that religious reference to Saint Valentine.
Well, that's like
Off
Christmas
the way.
that comes
Yeah.
down to
They
Labor.
don't-
That
they-
comes on the day after Labor Day.
Everything has to be secular now. You can't have
That's
any acknowledgement of religion in the public
But-
sphere.
I think it has a lot to do with the president, but it's not Happy Holidays, or not that much, but it's a lot more Merry Christmas than it's been in a long time.
It's made a comeback. Yeah, it
Yeah,
has
he
made
helped
a.
push that. You're
And
right.
maybe
He did.
I think it was coming back a little bit before then, but
When he was running for president, he would have on his podium, he would have "Merry Christmas" when he was campaigning, or I should say after the election when he went out in December and he was greeting crowds. I remember him having "Merry Christmas" on the podium at Christmas time. But you are seeing, I gauge it on the Macy's parade. The ending of Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade, it would always say "Merry Christmas." They'd run all the credits, it would say "Merry Christmas."
Right.
And then some years ago, it changed to "Happy Holidays."
right.
And they must have
That
gotten
was bad.
deluged with criticism because a year or two later, it was "Merry Christmas and have a nice holiday."
Right.
But "Merry Christmas" is up on top. They must have gotten pushback, and
Yes.
they
You know who did it?
went back.
It was the atheists that did that.
Oh, sure, of
Or-
course, yeah.
That's one. Yeah.
Because I know up in Wisconsin, in downtown Elkhorn, there's the Walworth County building, because that's where the seat of the Walworth County is, and it's right in the middle of Elkhorn. And they had a beautiful nativity scene on the grounds of Walworth County. And the atheists complained about it, so what did they do? They moved it across the street. Now it's on the grounds of St. Patrick Catholic Church.
No, that's. It takes a certain. I think it seems to me it takes a certain type of personality to be so bitter, and so resentful of what other people think, that you kind of travel the country looking for things and people that you can sue, looking for an opportunity to sue somebody, and take them to court for something that's not harming you in the slightest. It's
That's
not
right.
harming you in any way. But it takes a certain mentality that is so bitter about things that's what you devote yourself to.
That's right.
That
That's
mentality,
my
that-
editorial on the
That
subject.
mentality, I agree with you, John. That mentality, though, is just someone that wants to get their name.
Part of it is that,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Part of it is that.
It's an awful lot of it.
In this day, well, always anybody could sue anybody for whatever they want.
All it takes to file a lawsuit.
I always thought if they did that and they lost, they should be able to pay all the legal fees.
Well, the courts have ruled. The Supreme Court ruled some years ago that you can have religious displays on public property, provided that it is part of a general Christmas display with other things.
Right.
If a city hall put up a nativity scene and that's all, that would not meet the Supreme Court's criterion. But if you have a Christmas tree and a Santa Claus and reindeer and maybe a Jewish menorah,
Right.
You can have a nativity scene, and there's no problem. The difficulty is that there are cities and towns and counties that don't want the hassle. They figure if you don't have anything, you won't get sued.
Right.
You won't have any. But legally, there's no reason that you cannot have a nativity scene displayed on public property, so long as there are other holiday displays there and it's part of
Or
that general display.
If you give them the opportunity to.
Yeah,
put
and
up
if
a
you give
display.
other yeah.
Open it to
And
them.
if they don't want to, whose fault is that?
When they have that Chris Kindle market downtown, I remember when I haven't been there for a few years, but I remember they had a nativity scene, they had a Jewish menorah, and then I think there was some display from the Consolidated Atheists of America. There was they put up some sort of a display criticizing, and it was there. They put it on alongside all these other things. They had this absurd statement from the atheists saying we don't believe in any of this. But
I'd like to
they
know
were-
what symbol
they-
atheists use.
I don't recall.
Maybe
I
just
don't.
words,
I don't
just words,
recall
yeah.
what.
Foxhole.
I remember looking at it and being a little bit, bemused by it, and then walking on. I didn't spend much time.
That's what, if they
looking
put up,
at
an
it.
atheist put up, I would dig a foxhole right next to it. There's no
There's no
atheist in a foxhole.
Yeah.
Well, they should establish their own church.
Well, some
I
of them,
really have
some of
problems
them
with it, yeah.
say that their beliefs is a church.
Atheism is a belief. Atheism is a belief. They believe there is no God. They can no more prove to your satisfaction that there is no God than you can prove to their
prove the
satisfaction
negative.
that there is a God. So they believe that the notion that somehow they represent science or something is ridiculous. They just simply don't. They believe there is no God. Which
Just
doesn't,
because they believe it doesn't make it so.
their beliefs are no more important than anybody else's.
That's right.
beliefs.
Unless you're a politician.
And we're coming up on the ending of our fourth half-hour segment. Rich?
We'll be right back after these messages of interest and importance.
Wow.
Hello, friends. Do you need new tires for your vehicle? How are the brakes? Are they in good condition? How's your front wheel alignment? Do you need your tires rotated? How are the shocks and struts? Do you need an oil and grease change? How about a tune-up? When was the last time you had your engine tuned up? How about the wiper blades? Are they nice, sharp blades to clean off the rain and snow? How are the headlights, tail lights, stop lights, turn directional signals? Are all the bulbs working? How's your cooling system and the exhaust system? How about your battery? Does that need to be upgraded? How about the belts and hoses? Fuel injectors, timing belt and chain, and the air conditioning. Is that all working properly? Well, if you need any maintenance work done on your vehicle, go to Grand Tire and Auto Service, which is located at 7034 West Grand Avenue in Chicago. They are on Grand Avenue on the north side of the street, about 2 blocks east of Harlem Avenue. You can't miss the building. There's a big Goodyear sign right on top of the building. Or you can call area code 773-622-4361. Don, Chris, or Ken will be more than happy to assist you and to help you with any questions you might have about the maintenance on your vehicle. Their hours are Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 7 o'clock in the evening. Saturday from 7:30 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And even on Sunday from 9:30 in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So once again, for any maintenance work you might need on your vehicle, go to Grand Tire and Auto Supply. Once again, their address is at 7034 West Grand Avenue in Chicago, about 2 blocks east of Harlem Avenue on the north side of the street. And their phone number is area code 773-622-4361. They have great service. Their mechanics are all certified mechanics, and they do quality work. Now, I've been going to Grand Tire with my vehicle since 1985, right up until this present day. So once again, Grand Tire and Auto Service at 7034 West Grand Avenue in Chicago. Their phone number is 773-622-4361. Don, Chris, and Ken will be more than happy to help you and to advise you on any maintenance work you might need on your vehicle. So once again, Grand Tire and Auto Service at 7034 Grand Avenue in Chicago, about 2 blocks east of Harlem Avenue on the north side of the street. You can't miss the building because there's a big Goodyear sign on the top of the building. That's Grand Tire and Auto Service, 7034 Grand Avenue in Chicago, and their phone number is area code 773-622-4361. For quality service, it's Grand Tire Auto Service, 7034 Grand Avenue in Chicago, 773-622-4361. You will be completely satisfied with the work that they do.
Now back to our show. John?
Well, thank you, Rich Lang, our intrepid announcer. We're heading into our final 25 minutes of our January edition of Meet the Chicago Historians, and we've been glad to be with you here. This is our opening edition of a new year. We were off the air for 2 months as our producer and creator and impresario John DeVita was undergoing a bit of needed surgery, and he's you watch for him this afternoon. He's going to be jogging, as we mentioned earlier. He's going to be on the highways and byways of the Northwest Side, so you may spot him in that very elegant Meet the Chicago Historian sweatshirt that he has. So
did you say needed surgery?
I think it was necessary, is what.
I thought you said he had needed surgery.
Yeah, needed. So we're in our final stanza of our program here today, and we've talked about a number of things. We've got 25 minutes. We could just sort of open this up to each and any of our members. If you have a topic that you'd like to present, I know Rich. I know you're active with Old Time Radio. Is there anything coming up with your Old Time Radio?
No, we just had a past show in bad weather last Friday night at Mathers in Norwood Park. Nothing. We'll be doing a show a week from today at the Eisenhower Public Library. Wish I knew the time. I think it's going to be early evening.
Where is the Eisenhower Public Library?
Wilson and one of the O Streets, about 3 blocks west of Oketo. You're right, John. Thank you. Oketo and Wilson, about 3 blocks west of Harlem.
What are some of the programs you're going to be doing?
Why, we'll be doing My Favorite Husband, an old Lucille Ball sketch.
Oh.
The Bickersons are always good.
Oh, that's great.
Eben Costello. We'll hit the greats.
That's great. That's great. Yeah,
Bunch of nostalgia.
The Bickersons, that was Don Amici also.
Yeah, Frances Langford, right.
The great singer.
Now, don't rile me, Blanche.
Didn't she go along with some tours with Bob Hope?
Yes. Oh, she was big in that. Yeah.
Oh,
Frances
yeah,
Langford.
yeah. You called me an ugly old bag. I did not call you an ugly
I wouldn't say that.
old bag. I don't like the way you said that.
Now, every so often there's a hardcore of people we run into who don't like the Bickersons because it portrays marriage in a bad light. Yeah. But I think most people see the humor in it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could say the same thing about the Honeymooners. I mean,
it's good comparison.
You know, and everybody loves the Honeymooners because in the end, you always knew they really loved
Right to the moon, Alice.
The best kind of humor I always liked came on the stick.
You know, to let everybody know, all our listeners know that anybody that lives in the Harwood Heights, Norwich area, you can tune your FM radio to 88.1 WRWX, and you will hear the best of old time radio shows on 24 hours a day.
Yep,
But
loud
you
on
have
radio.
to live in Norwich or Harwood Heights, because that's as far as our signal goes.
Yeah.
But it's WRWX 88.1, and it's on 24 hours a day. It's the best of old time radio shows. Right now, as I'm listening with my other ear, the Lone Ranger is on right now.
John, I remember in the old WJJG, you did a lot of the best of old time radio.
Yes, Tony Aridia, the retired mayor
that's
from
interesting.
Des Plaines. He and I, we did that every Wednesday morning for about 3 or 4 years. We had the best of old time radio shows. Him, Tony, and then his partner was Pesky's, Ray Pesky, that has Pesky's Flowers right down on River Road, just before I get to Maryville. We used to do old time radio shows.
I know John gave me a recording of one of the classic radio routines. You mentioned Abbott and Costello, their famous Who's On First.
Who's on first?
which
Who's on
is
second?
One of the funniest bits ever
No,
done
yeah.
by anybody
Oh, yeah.
in entertainment.
I think it's still our favorite
Yeah.
show.
You know, I've got to.
very popular.
Oh, yeah.
I've got to find that disc again, because the baseball season will be coming up pretty soon, and we'll
Could
we'll-
run it, yeah,
we'll-
we run it.
We'll have to run.
I
that
don't
down.
know. Third base. I don't even know what I'm
Classic.
talking about.
What's amazing?
But
that
anyways,
that's
anybody
straight.
that's in Norwich or Harwood Heights, 88.1 on the FM dial, you pick up the old time radio show, and it's on 24 hours. It's being broadcast right out of our John DeVita Broadcast Center here
great.
in an undisclosed location, and that has to be undisclosed.
Yeah, but it's only audible in this
Yes,
area.
yes,
Yeah,
because
that's
we don't have a very strong signal.
too bad.
Yeah.
I'd love to listen to that. Bill, do you have? I know you mentioned about the open house you're going to have at your museum. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about the museum?
Saturday, the museum has got their monthly open house from 10 to 2, and 5218 Southwestern, and we are having a quite a big deal, if that's the right word. We have dedicated the second floor of the museum to our friend Ken Little.
Beautiful, excellent.
And
excellent.
His portrait hangs here in our great
yes,
hall.
we never forget Ken.
No.
He will never be forgotten. But that second floor is loaded with journals, with orders, with papers, with all kinds of stuff. It is a library. And on the first floor, of course, we have a couple of rigs that are, I should say, fire trucks that have been the one completely done over from 1918, I think it is.
That's
And
amazing.
the thing runs like top. I just love to see the kids come in and put them up there on the seat and put a helmet on them or whatever and take their picture. You know, I know those pictures will last for years. We just need a bigger place. I know that we are there. It's a neat place. It's an old firehouse, but we have an awful lot of stuff stored, and in another area, not too far from the museum, but you can't get into it. You know, it isn't put up for display, and we don't have room for it here. Oh, it's the problem that we are running into. But please come on and see us. 5218 Southwestern Avenue. And parking is okay. The police know that on that day to look the other way if the parking gets a little bit tight. So please come and see us.
It's very interesting and well worth the trip.
Oh boy, it's something that we're about 20 years into this, and it's something that should have been done, 100 years ago. A museum, the Chicago Fire Department,
Yeah.
we celebrate almost burning down the town in 1871 with all the different displays, and
Right.
we used to have parades and the whole bit. Well, now we have the Fire Museum of Greater Chicago.
Right.
Come and see us, 5218 Southwestern Avenue.
Very good.
Yeah,
Don, do you have anything you'd like to
on that
talk
same
about?
vein, at 2311 West 57th Street is, for lack of a better word, the museum shops. And we're coming very close to having Engine 8 being done. It's being painted now, so maybe through the grace of God and some good luck, we might have it, and it's a big might have it ready for the muster coming up on Father's Day weekend.
About how old is that engine?
It's 1925,
Oh, okay.
and it was at Chinatown, Engine 8, and Jack Connor's uncles worked on it.
Is
And
it
I
an-
think Jack Connors even worked at Engine 8 for a while.
He did, yes, he did.
And
Is it an American LaFrance?
no, it's the Seagraves,
Seagraves?
right? And we've been working on it for a while, but we're getting to the point where all it needs is a pretty decent paint job, and we have to put the seats in, maybe bumpers or little stuff. And what you were referring to before, we've got our oldest running one is a 1918 Mack Bulldog.
Wow.
And we've got the last stick shift engine that was in service in the city. It's a 1918 Ford, what is it? Emergency One. And most of them are all running.
Where do
So
you keep these? Where are they stored?
on 57th
On this
in-
address that you
in
just
Claremont?
mentioned? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's just east of, about a block and a half east
Is this
of
a
West.
museum? Is it
No,
it's a
that's
repair
not the
shop.
museum.
It's a
Oh, okay.
warehouse.
Yeah, it's just a warehouse that we have where we keep this stuff.
So
and
that's affiliated with that's part of your
it is
Yeah,
ours.
it's the same
yes.
museum, it's
but,
just a
but
different
it's
location.
not.
It's-
Nobody can get in there.
Right, it's
you
just
know.
where you do your where
Yeah.
you do work.
That's
Yes.
where we
It's our
kind of,
workshop.
a lot of people say restore them, we kind of
But you
preserve
keep these
them.
engines there. They're kept,
Yeah.
kept there.
You know, gentlemen, it's too bad with all these Catholic schools that are closing up on all that somebody wouldn't let you have a gymnasium where you can store display all the equipment that you have. I mean, there's just going to be an empty room and an empty hall. Nobody's going to be in there, and it'd be nice if one of those Catholic schools in that area would say, well, you know, here's our gymnasium. Put your fire display in there, and where people can come and see. Because those rigs, I know I was part of the Fire Museum of Greater Chicago. In fact, my son was the one that came up with the name Fire Museum of Greater Chicago when we were first meeting back when we used to meet with Father McCrone down at the church down by St. Ignatius, and their gentlemen just dedicate themselves to preserve and that library that Bill was talking about at 5218 Southwestern. I was there the day that the library was dedicated, and it's just wonderful. It's just wonderful to know that people still have an interest in antiques and things that from years ago. I know I am, and I wish I could be more active in stuff, but being the age of 81 going on 82, the generator just goes so far before it conks out. And but the fire service, I tell this to everybody that crosses my path. There's two things in my life I enjoy. One of them is what we're doing right now, radio broadcasting, and the fire department. Those are that's the love of my life. If I was to put them on a teeter-totter, it would be equal. It would not be
Balanced.
It would be balanced perfect. Yes.
Well, very good. Well, we've had an interesting program. We've talked about a variety. We didn't have an overall theme today. Often we'll have a particular concept we'll talk about, movies or television or police or fire. Today we talked about a variety of things. And I think it's been a very interesting and enlightening program about the KCs and some things about veterans. talked about a number of interesting topics. We didn't talk a great deal about the news. I thought today everyone would want to talk about all the news, but maybe we've reached a point where people are they've just had it with all that.
Saturated.
I heard a fascinating item that I'll pass on to you. I heard this on the radio this morning that Adam Schiff, who's been the face of impeachment for months now,
Right.
he's been on television for the last several years. On any given Sunday, if you bet that Adam Schiff would be on one of the television Sunday morning shows, you would almost certainly be right, because he's constantly on. And for those of you who might not know who he is, he's a congressman from California, and he's the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, and everybody's seen him. Well, apparently last week on Jeopardy, they had a category of United States congressmen, and Alex Trebek put his picture up
Nobody knew him.
and said he's one of 53 California congressmen that nobody buzzed in. No one knew who he was. And Trebek says his name is Adam Schiff, and he's chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. So it just demonstrates that the media is not as powerful as they think they are. They've been promoting this guy and putting him in our face for 2 years now or more. Because
Right.
even when he wasn't the chairman of the Senate committee, when he was the minority member, he was on TV. And nobody, and these are Jeopardy contestants, so these are presumably intelligent people, and they didn't know who Adam Schiff was. So that kind of made my morning, driving over here on the way. That's one of the reasons I entered the show this morning with a bounce in my step and a smile on my face.
I mean,
And
this-
nobody knew who Adam
This has
Schiff
been going on
was.
so long. I guess people kind of watched to begin with, but now it's.
I guess they did have they had the Jeopardy greatest of all time tournament, and
That was good.
Ken Jennings won
won again.
once again. He was the crowned the greatest of all time, won the trophy, and he won three of the episodes of the program. So I watched a little bit of that.
All
I
three
mean-
contestants were men.
Yes, yeah, they were all, and the fellow, the third fellow didn't do he didn't win a single contest. The fellow
Not
on
that bad.
the fellow on the far left, he won one of the episodes.
Ooh, the far left. No.
Yeah. Well, as you're facing, I don't recall his name, but as you faced him, he would have been on the left side, and the other gentleman was on the right. And the gentleman on the right, his final answer was, "You're a great guy, Alex Trebek." That was his. He didn't know the answer of the final Jeopardy question, so he wrote down, "You're a great guy, Alex."
What was
Trebek."
that game show that started the payola?
Oh, 21. One of them was
No,
21.
A certain dollar
$20,000, $64,000.
$64,000.
Yeah.
Well, that was the
That was a
64,000.
big.
But that was not the scandal. The scandal was not on the $64,000 question. The scandal, I believe, was on 21. 21. It was 21 that
People had the answers ahead of time.
that was 21.
Who was that guy?
The
like
erudite sort of English professor type,
Professor?
who was the I'm drawing up. It's been so long. It was 1958, I think, that took place.
A more
But-
recent movie about it. Yeah.
But that was in the name of the program was 21.
That sounds-
And they had the isolation. There was a big show which I remember we always watched called the $64,000 question, and I can still remember the theme song of that show. It showed how much I watched TV as a kid.
Right.
That was the one that was a little bit of a problem.
They had, but it wasn't. They were not the focus of the investigation. But when the scandal hit, all those shows went on. In a short time, they were all gone.
Right.
And TV was just littered with game shows at that time.
Right.
I mean, they were almost pushing the westerns off the air, because westerns were the other big thing in the 50s. But 21 was the Charles Van Doren.
Oh, good.
Charles
Good.
Van Doren.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Charles Van Doren was and the little guy who was the foil, the little guy who they decided was going to be out. This little sort of a nebbish looking guy. They wanted him to lose because Charles Van Doren looked like a Hollywood star, and this guy did not look like a Hollywood star. So they wanted him off the air, and so they told him, "You're going to lose tonight." And they gave him a question that he knew the answer to. I think it had to do with the movie Marnie with Ernest Borgnine.
Yeah,
that
that
was,
sounds
that was the
familiar.
question and he knew the answer, but he was obliged to blow it. He was
throw it,
obliged. He had
Yeah.
because that was part of the deal. Was when we tell you, we've carried you all this way, and then when we tell you you're through, you're through. So they told him he had to lose that night, and he was. I remember when they interviewed him later. He was when this all blew up. He was very resentful because it was his favorite movie. I mean, he'd seen this movie 20 times,
Right.
and he had to act as though he didn't know the answer to the question.
How long they thought they could keep this going without it all blowing up? I mean, how long can you
Yeah.
keep sitting on these things without the truth coming
I
out?
wonder what would happen if he was peed off at him. He says, "Well, I know the answer, but they won't let
Well,
me.
that's the thing.
They won't let me say
He
it."
could have dynamited the whole
Oh,
thing
that would've
if
been
he had
fun.
just answered the question. You know,
Right.
what could they have done? You can't know that because this is
We've
all
told-
rigged. You know,
Right, yeah.
He's not supposed to answer it. Come and arrest this fellow. He broke the.
Yeah, what is the check gonna bounce? I don't want a check. I want cash.
All I remember as a kid that my father said this is all fake. I remember my grandmother
He
loved
sensed that long before?
Yeah,
Did
my
he really?
grandmother
Okay.
loved these shows. My grandmother was always watching the quiz shows, and I remember my dad telling her this is all fake. It's
Whoa.
all fixed.
Interesting.
He was saying nobody could be that intelligent. He said except my son. You know, so
Well, yeah,
he
yeah.
said nobody could know all. It was too complex. They'd get these people up there and they're giving you these Einstein's equations, and my grandmother would get very angry. I remember my grandmother, no, they're smart people.
Right.
Well, maybe it was 6 months later that the whole thing
was-
collapsed.
it was- Kind of like those wrestling shows where the guy would grab him by the head and bang him into the post and bounce up and
yeah,
down
well,
on
that was,
his.
yeah, sure, that was all fake.
Yeah.
That was all showmanship.
Right.
But most people knew that, and you had to
Yeah.
be a good
Yeah,
athlete to.
you knew that wrestling
Yeah,
was fake.
yeah, most-
I mean,
right, most people did.
yeah,
I had a
exactly.
grandmother who didn't. but-
My grandfather used to love What's My Line? Because what was that? John Daly? Was that
John Charles
John
Daly.
Charles.
It was on Sunday
yeah,
night, I believe.
yeah, on Sunday night. That's right.
Bennett
And
Cerf.
John would say one word, and see, he's giving it away. See, he's giving it away. That was my grandpa's favorite saying. See, he's giving it away. The guy got the answer.
But that was only for like if you went through you got like $50. I mean,
Yeah.
remember they would turn those cards over and each one was like $5.
Right.
And if you got all 10, you went away with $50.
A little more
or
money in
something.
those days, but still, it was a
Yeah, but it wasn't like
And then they-
$64,000. You know?
Some, and I remember watching it. Remember in the 50s they had a thing called M Squad?
Oh yeah, Lee Marvin.
Yeah.
Set in Chicago.
Supposedly
And they had
filmed in
Chicago
Chicago.
scenes.
Chicago police in the city hated it. They didn't want. They used
Yeah.
to chase.
Oh,
it.
Mayor
They-
Daley
They,
was-
That's
they,
what, yeah,
they didn't want any TV shows filmed in Chicago.
right.
Or movies, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, M Squad. It was a good show. Yeah, his
Yeah.
name was Lieutenant Ballinger.
Right.
He was Frank Ballinger.
Right.
was his character's
and I
name.
can't
Is he a
remember
sergeant or
the
lieutenant?
thing
I'm not
was-
sure.
But in the
Yeah.
background, they had one of those gas tanks that went up and down, and that was off of Roosevelt Road and
Oh,
someplace
That was
like
an
that.
era.
And well, they had one.
Near Six Corners had one for a long while. on
Yeah,
Earth, I guess,
but
for-
in where I live in Oak Park now, it was now Berry Park, but they had two of those things, and they were like
It's a study.
100 feet, and they would store gas in there
Yeah.
for heating, and it would go up and it go down, and they could tell how much gas was in there.
Well, I know Lee Marvin said that they were constantly being virtually harassed by the Chicago police. They did the Mayor Daley did not want. He was afraid that anything about police or crime would remind people of the 1920s and bootlegging, and he wanted to get Chicago away from that roaring 20s image.
Right.
So even though this was set in the 50s, was set in that present.
57, 58,
He
something like
he
that.
didn't want, and it was a police show. It wasn't about
Right.
organized crime or
Right.
Capone or anything. He just didn't want anything connecting Chicago with crime and law. So
But I don't think much of the show was ever filmed in Chicago,
No.
just establishing shots.
you'd see
Oh,
shots
it was,
of the
it
Wrigley
was, yeah,
building.
exactly.
it was
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Chicago.
Otherwise-
But I remember he shot some guy, and he was dead. He said, "Okay, let's go." And they walked away.
Real
There-
different in those days. yeah.
There's a movie with about Chicago police called, I think, The City That Never Sleeps, and it's not New York. It's before that song was written, and it's about the Chicago police. Chill Wills is in it,
Wow.
and Gig Young plays a young Chicago cop who's on the take, and
On the take.
he's about to leave his wife and run off with his girlfriend.
It was a series.
No, this is a movie, and
Oh,
but it's
boy.
shot in Chicago. But this is pre-Mayor Daley. This is like 1948. This is back when 48 would have been Kennelly. Let's see, Kennelly. That would have been just around the.
Kennelly.
I think it would have been Kennelly. Yeah, Kennelly's late. Kennelly became mayor, I think, in '47. So this was filmed in like '48 or '49. So apparently he didn't have the hostility to stuff being filmed in Chicago. But you can, I mean, it's filmed on the L. You see the elevated tracks. You see the Wrigley. A lot of it takes
Right.
place right around the Wrigley building downtown.
Did they have a
And you
scene
see
where
other scenes in Chicago?
where they were going after a guy at Old Midway Airport?
No,
And they had
no,
a 58
no,
Chicago squad car pulled up.
not
to
in
it.
this movie. No.
Oh,
no,
this
no,
was
no,
a movie.
No.
And
That
I
sounds
can't,
almost like North by Northwest.
North by
yeah,
Northwest.
that's the one it was.
Yeah, North by Northwest. That's Cary Grant, where they go to the airport. But I don't think it's Midway. I think they go to O'Hare. I think they.
I don't think O'Hare was
No,
up and running in
movie came out
58.
about 58 or 59.
Because it was a
Before O'Hare
58
was
Ford
established.
squad car. Because my dad had a
sure it was
58
Midway.
Ford. That's the only reason I
I
recognized
think I
it.
remember the terminal. Yeah.
It was that the old terminal? Because O'Hare has been around since World War II. I mean, the airport's been there.
Well,
since
yeah,
World
but
War
they
II.
That's the
didn't.
major
They didn't
passenger.
start
I'm-
commercial until
But they do have the airport scene with Leo G. Carroll and Cary
60
Grant
something.
Right.
in the airport.
Mainly
yeah.
in a squad car.
Yeah, the
until the
cops.
Jets came in.
I always thought it was O'Hare because he's arrested on the north side. He's in this art gallery on the north side of
Right.
the city, and they take him to the airport. I kind of assumed that they would have gone
With
to
James
O'Hare.
Mason.
when the
James
Jets
Mason
first came in is when
Soviet agent.
O'Hare came into being. Because they couldn't get him into Midway because Midway is only the runway is only
Yeah,
a mile
yeah.
long.
Jesse Royce Landis, who was in a number of his films, plays his mother.
Eva
his,
Marie Saint.
Yeah, Eva Marie Saint. That's a great film. I think
We're showing movies someday.
I think it may be the best Hitchcock film of all the
It's a good
Hitchcock
one.
films. I think it's a great film. And you could follow that route. He gets caught in that cornfield. I've often thought you could actually go out and visit these sites where it was filmed. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the end of our 2.5 hours for January. We hope you've enjoyed listening to our program today. We'll be back next month on the 17th of February with our Washington, Lincoln, and St. Valentine's Day edition. So on behalf of our producer and creator, John DeVita, and all of my fellow panelists today, thank you for listening. And for our final going away presentation, I'll turn to our ace and intrepid announcer, Rich Lang.
We wish to thank Kevin of Jack FM, WRHS 89.7 FM, for broadcasting our shows over the Ridgewood Radio Network. A special thanks to the executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, John Seconda. Recordings of previous Meet the Chicago Historians programs are available for your listening pleasure via the internet at www.windycityhometown.com. This is your announcer, Rich Lang. So long until next time.
You have been listening to Meet the Chicago Historians from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network on Monday, January the 20th, the year 2020. This broadcast was produced and directed by John DeVita, and our special thanks to the executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, Mr. John Chikanda. This program was pre-recorded on Monday, January the 20th, the year 2020. Until next time, friends, please be safe and thanks for listening.